Hello and welcome to 6 part. Today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Deku Was Blessed by Shinigami, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
For the majority of the world, Izuku Midoriya was quirkless. She is a shorter than average girl with big, shiny green eyes, a cute, freckled face, and curly, dark green hair that reaches between her shoulder blades. While some viewed her as a weakling and pitiful for not having any quirks, others saw her as a bright girl who needed to be shielded from her own perilous dreams. Not even her teachers or neighbors thought she could be a hero without a quirk, but it didn't matter. Izuku did have a quirk, which she had concealed since she was 9 years old, but the people who mattered, her mother, her uncle Toshinori, and her only real friend, Katsuki Bakugo, were aware of it. Shortly after Izuku's 9th birthday, during summer break, it had occurred. Desperate for company, she followed Katsuki, affectionately referring to him as Kachan as he attempted to dump her due to her eccentric personality, all the while insulting her and referring to her as Deku. Izuku might have just beaten her up and left her if he had been a boy, but even though Kachan didn't give a damn about her gender, others probably would, and if something like that ended up on his record, it might prevent him from becoming #1 hero. Boys being boys wasn't exactly an excuse he could use. As his other friends laughed at her, Izuku dutifully followed Kachan, grinning feebly at his taunts and occasionally whimpering, "That's mean, Kachan." She was a girl, so most boys didn't want to play with her, and the girls didn't want to play with her because she was too tomboyish in her behavior and appearance. Of course, neither gender would play with a girl who didn't have any quirks. Aside from her fear of loneliness, the only reason she continued to try to make friends with Kachan was because he had been her only friend prior to them discovering she was eccentric. But on that hot summer day, everything changed. Kachan's wandering group of children found themselves in the woods outside Endor Ward, where they had set up a covert base. Naturally, Izuku followed, but she was not permitted to enter the base itself. It was an abandoned shack, so she sat on the small bench outside and watched Kachan engage in play combat with a boy who had a force field quirk. Kachan preferred to practice his explosion quirk on the only child who could reasonably defend against it, while the other boys were in the shack playing on their portable gaming systems. Izuku exclaimed, "That's awesome, Kachan," as Katsuki shattered the force field like glass, sending the other boy reeling backwards in shock. With his chest pumped, Katsuki bragged, "Shut up, Deku. I know I'm awesome. That's why I'll be #1. The other boy mocked Izuku, saying, "Yeah, Katsuki actually has the ability to become a hero. I bet I could too, but you'd be lucky to even get into our fan clubs." In an attempt to restore his damaged pride by disparaging the only person he could, Izuku mumbled, "I can be a hero if I try really hard," as she wilted at the remark and looked down. Rolling his eyes, Katsuki motioned to the force field boy to erect another barrier so they could practice some more. Izuku continued to observe them until she abruptly noticed a red flash coming from atop one of the trees. When the red flashed before her once more, she tilted her head in confusion, wondering what she had seen. This time, however, she could clearly see it because it had stopped right on top of Kachan. The man was dressed in a white hockey mask with mouth holes arranged to resemble a skull's teeth and a blood-red hoodie. The man had a small butcher's knife hanging from his right hip and a large meat cleaver hanging from his left. Every blade on his person was stained by what could only be blood, and multiple scalpels were inserted into what appeared to be a bandolier on his chest. Katsuki was knocked down and had a knee placed on his back by the man who had landed directly on top of him. He skillfully held the boy's 2 hands together behind his back with just one of his own enormous hands. Katsuki wailed, "What the hell? Get the hell off me, you freak." The man smiled, his voice distorted and nasal, and said, "Oh, not a chance, boy. You've got a pretty nice quirk and I want it. But to take it, I'll be needing your heart." Under his mask, he undoubtedly had a voice changer of some kind. Izuku let out a gasp. She recognized the individual. He was Jack of Hearts, a villain who, if he came into close physical contact with someone, could mimic their peculiarities. According to the news, he had killed a number of people and taken their hearts, the only part of the victims that would still function with his quirk after the victim had passed away. When he screamed, "Villain!" at the top of his lungs and ran away, the force field boy must have recognized him too, or just succumbed to fear. When the boys in the shack saw Jack of Hearts, they all screamed and fled after peeking out to see what was causing the commotion. Ah, did all your little friends run away? It's too bad. Sorry brat, but I've got that blonde smelly freak chasing me and your quirk is exactly what I need to finally finish him. Jack laughed as he slowly drew one of his scalpels and twirled it so Katsuki could see every move. Katsuki yelled after them, calling them cowards. Izuku yelled, "Stop," to Katsuki's and Jack's surprise. When the villain threw the scalpel at her, the young girl rushed toward Jack, determined to save her friend. When the blade pierced Izuku's upper arm, she screamed as the pain suddenly spread throughout her entire limb. Katsuki yelled, "You idiot! Run Deku," with an even more frightened expression. Jack pulled his hoodie open to reveal his bare and almost gaunt chest and dozens of hearts sewn to his skin in a way that made him appear muscular while wearing clothing. "Ah, your little girlfriend wants to save you. She's got more of a spine than those others. Tell you what," Jack said, "once I cut out your heart, I'll take hers and sew it on right next to yours." Katsuki shouted, "Don't, she's quirkless. She can't do anything." As she withdrew the scalpel, Izuku was trying her hardest to contain her tears. There was no risk of fatal bleeding because the blade was thin and short and had not struck any significant blood vessels. She glanced up at Jack, who was grabbing for the butcher's knife. If that struck her, she would definitely die, but the villain wasn't looking at her. Instead, his eyes were focused on Kachan and filled with a manic desire. Jack laughed and withdrew the knife for the plunge, saying, "Too bad, I guess your heart will be all on its own then." Izuku's eyes widened while Katsuki's closed in terror. As she threw herself at the villain, she didn't even consider the fact that she wanted to be a hero. All she saw before her was the gleam of a knife and the death it held for another person. She wasn't worried about her dreams or feelings, nor was she afraid of getting hurt or dying. Her legs shifted by themselves. Izuku slammed into Jack's side, seized his arm in both of her tiny hands, and tugged frantically, causing Jack to recoil. She needed to get the knife out of the villain's hands, but her pulling was in vain because she was only as strong as a child against an adult. With a quick thought, she bit down as loudly as she could while sinking her teeth into the man's hand. As Jack screamed and the knife dropped to the ground next to Kachan's head, he was able to grab it with his own teeth and throw it away with a head swing, leaving her mouth tasting of blood. Jack roared, "Damn bitch," and slammed Izuku and his arm into the ground. As bile slowly made its way up Izuku's throat to join the blood in her mouth, she gasped and let go of Jack. Jack slammed his now bleeding hand down on her back as she rolled onto her front and puked. Jack was holding both kids down while they were in the same pose, face down on the woods floor. Izuku was merely restrained by his left hand on the small of her back, while Katsuki's wrists were trapped in his right. "You know, you're a really annoying brat. That blonde prick is hot on my ass, so I don't have time to make this really fun, so here's a little taste of your own friend's quirk." Jack replied with a sneer. The eyes of both kids grew wide. Katsuki shouted, But I thought you needed my heart to use my quirk." In an attempt to hold the villain off long enough for his assailant to close the distance. Jack smiled viciously under his mask, but his eyes conveyed his sadistic pleasure. "I only need your heart if you're dead. Since you're alive, skin contact is enough. Let me demonstrate," he said. "Wait." An ear-splitting scream and the sound of an explosion interrupted Katsuki's yell. When the boy saw the smoke and flames from the explosion coming from Izuku's back, he appeared appalled. The little girl's back hurt so much that it was impossible to describe how terrible it was. It felt like every inch of skin had been burned off. Blood and smoke poured from the huge wound on the girl's back, and Katsuki retched as the air was filled with the sickening smell of cooking flesh. Izuku's face twisted in a silent scream of agony as her scream gradually faded away as the last of the air left her lungs. When she attempted to inhale, her eyes went dull and her head fell to the floor. She was unable to breathe or feel her heart pounding. Gradually, all color left her vision until only darkness was left. Next, Katsuki's cries grew softer until they were no longer audible. She lost all sense of smell, and the smell of her own cooking flesh became weaker. Another sense vanished, followed by the taste of bile and blood on her tongue. Finally, Izuku lost all sense when the pain in her back and the sensation of the ground beneath her body subsided. There was nothing but her thoughts. "I died," she thought, feeling strangely at ease in light of the events that had just transpired. For a while, she remained in that state, unable to determine whether this new circumstance was bad or not. On the one hand, she was pain-free, but on the other, she was, well, dead. "He's still with the villain," she thought, straying to Kachan. "If help doesn't arrive, that monster will consume him. But what could she do now that she was dead? Mom will cry. She cries when I skin my knee or cut myself, she thought, then turned to her mother. How will she react when she finds out? She asked herself. I'm hoping Uncle Toshi takes care of her. But what could she do now that she was dead? She kept thinking about her father, the man who had left her and her mother when it became apparent that she was quirkless. I wish that man had never met Mom, she said. She wouldn't have had to bury her child, and she wouldn't have been stuck with a quirkless child. I'm not sure if I hate him, but is this how hate feels? But what could she do now that she was dead? She then thought of Uncle Toshinori. Uncle Toshi, I'm sorry I have to leave Mom to you. Please take care of her. I hope you heal from that wound. She recalled how a villain had severely injured him just a few months prior, limiting his use of his hero form. But what could she do now that she was dead? She wished to avoid death. She had to assist Kachan. She had to return to her mother. Uncle Toshi needed her assistance. She had to survive, so live. Izuku was startled by the deep voice, and all of her senses returned in a flash. Now she was floating far above the clouds, the sun illuminating the sky in gold, and no longer in the forest. She could hear birdsong and smell flowers. She ran her hand through the clouds below, which felt like cotton. She scowled and said, "This can't be real, clouds are just water." The voice repeated, but this time Izuku could see where it was coming from. It is as real as anything, it is simply another kind of reality. A strange man wearing an off-white kimono was sitting on a cloud a few feet away from her. Along with his long horns and frightful face, he resembled some sort of oni due to his faded red skin and long, curved canine teeth. A kusarigama, a short scythe with a long chain at the end, was resting in the creature's lap. Recalling the tales of the death god appearing to guide the deceased to the afterlife, Izuku questioned, "Are you the Shinigami?" With a proud nod, the man declared, "Yes, I am Lord Shinigami, Keeper of the Gate." Keeper of the Gate, Izuku asked again, still in a daze and unable to completely comprehend the seriousness of the situation. "Yes, the gate to the beyond. Through the gate lies the path to the Great Wheel, where souls are judged and reincarnated. But fear not, the gate is closed to you. All others must pass through when faced with the Keeper, but you bear the gift of the scales, so only you can decide when to pass through the gate." Lord Shinigami replied in a deep, wise tone. Izuku nodded and started to murmur to herself, "So I definitely died, but I can't move on unless I chose to. Does this mean I'm stuck here like a ghost? And gift of the scales. It must be some sort of balance power, but why me and for what purpose? Perhaps." With his features contorted into what appeared to be a chuckle, Shinigami interrupted, saying, "It starts with your gift. Humans are the most intelligent and the most stupid in how they interpret and quantify their gifts, because they decided that such a thing as a bone in the toe can declare one as ungifted." Izuku cocked her head, attempting to comprehend the peculiar speech pattern of the death god. "You're talking about quirks. Wait, so the gift of the scales is my quirk?" Shinigami nodded. "Indeed, humans have named their gifts quirks. The logic is not lost on me, though I feel the word is unsuitable. Gifts are exactly what they are, abilities bestowed upon the living by the spirits of the world. I will explain, for this is also within your gift." Now that she was learning about quirks, the girl was sitting comfortably on the cloud next to the death god, smiling and listening eagerly. "Please do, Shinigami-sensei," she said. Shinigami took a deep breath and started. "The world you know is only half of the true world. One side of the coin. The other side, overlapping with yours, is the spirit realm where ghosts, spirits, kami and yokai reside. We are currently in a part of the spirit realm now. When a living being dies, they pass through the gate and are placed upon the wheel, where their soul is directed to where it belongs. Sometimes this soul is stripped clean and reincarnated, other times the soul is destroyed due to immense evil that has rotted it beyond repair, and some souls are left to wander free of the wheel, either due to powerful grudges, desires or some form of unfinished business which forms a connection that defies the power of the wheel. None can predict the wheel, for it is a force, much like gravity, and we have only just begun to understand its laws. So gods or kami are real. And what does that have to do with quirks?" Izuku responded. "Patience, young one, all will be explained. Time in both worlds will cease for as long as you are in this place. As I said, the spirit realm is inhabited by ghosts, spirits, kami and yokai. Ghosts are the souls of humans that have failed to be reincarnated or destroyed by the wheel. Spirits are souls that have been judged by the wheel to be worthy of acting as guardian of a specific piece of the human world, with the size of this piece varying from single objects like ink brushes or knives up to entire continents. Kami are spirits that have been raised even higher and govern aspects of existence. For example, I am Shinigami and I govern the aspect of death. Lastly, there are yokai, ghosts and spirits that have grown in power and can now act without direction from the Great Wheel. Essentially, they are rogue spirits that exist in the gap between the spirit world and human world and frequently cause mischief in both. Izuku nodded in agreement, her hands twitching as though she were trying to write in an imaginary notebook. Continuing from there, we get to gifts or quirks. You see, about 200 years ago, a certain spirit somehow regained the memories it held as a human and defied the wheel by latching onto a soul being sent back to Earth for reincarnation. The spirit was absorbed into the blank soul and the first of the gifted. The luminous baby was born. Other spirits were used to possess other humans to separate the wayward spirit from the baby and drag it back to the spirit realm, but when the rogue spirit and the ones sent after it left the bodies of the humans, the powers they held remained. Not only that, but the spirits that had possessed those humans had grown greatly in power. The bonding of spirit and human had created humans with gifts or quirks and spirits with immense power. Other spirits quickly joined in the craze, creating more gifted humans until the entire population was gifted. Following this, we observed that the gifts had manifested in the DNA of humans, allowing new gifted to be born without ever being connected to a spirit, hence the age of quirks began. Amazing. So humans gained their quirks from these spirits. What about the quirkless though? If spirits want to be powerful, shouldn't it be a race for them to get to a quirkless before others? Izuku responded. And there you have hit upon the crux of why you are here. You see, spirits weren't the only ones to learn this trick. The yokai learned too. Yokai began possessing humans to get the power increase, but their grudges, desires and connections would corrupt the human, nearly tripling the chances of them becoming evil. Spirits began hunting and destroying yokai, which lead to a war. Humans experienced this as natural disasters as spirits that governed large portions of land used it against the yokai, and many serial killers as yokai possessed humans murdered anyone they believed was possessed by a spirit. It lasted for 7 years and it was a black spot on our history. Izuku looked pale. That was the Sinner's 7, wasn't it? A 7-year period with countless disasters and murder rates higher than ever. Almost every religious leader declared it a punishment from God. I guess they weren't far off. I'm surprised a young one like you knows of it. The war ended 50 years ago, Shinigami said, raising an eyebrow. Well, that period is what led to the hero movement in the first place. People were so scared and the emergency services were stretched thin, so heroes were born to save people and fight villains others couldn't. Izuku admitted with a slight blush. Heroes, interesting. Regardless, the war was only ended when the kami decided that no one could possess a human. The wheel acted accordingly and began stripping power from spirits that continued to do so, and the yokai quickly forgot about it once they had no war to fight and no spirits to remind them of the ability. Yokai are rather fixated on their grudges and obsessions, so they return to normal with ease. Still, yokai are not a natural part of the world and need to be dealt with, as do rogue spirits that risk another war by ignoring the wheel and the law. This leads us to you and your gift, the gift of the scales. I'm guessing I have to deal with yokai and rogue spirits, right? Izuku asked, looking alert. Correct. Your gift was created by several kami, including myself, and bestowed upon you by a guardian spirit after we judged you to be worthy. We believe you are the best one for the job, based on your keen mind and heroic spirit. The gift grants you several abilities. One is the key to the gate, a power which will prevent you from passing on without actually wanting to. Essentially, you can die like any other human, but you have to choose to stay dead. If you don't pass through by the time that your guardian spirit had restored your body to a functioning state, you'll be shot back to your body. So I can come back to life as much as I want. The green-haired girl exclaimed, staring at the death god. Indeed, but that is not the true purpose of your gift. It is simply a way of ensuring you don't fail in your task by dying. The true purpose of your gift is in the other two abilities. Eye of the Spirit and Soul Tether. Eye of the Spirit will allow you to see and hear that which is beyond the sight of humans, enabling you to see spirits and yokai in your world. Soul Tether is the most important ability though. It allows you to bind spirits and yokai to yourself. Your task would be to find spirits and yokai that are causing trouble and either appease them to remove their attachments or destroy them. Once their attachments are removed, you can bind them to yourself, and the next time you die, those spirits bound to you will be returned to the Great Wheel. In addition, Any spirit bound to you will provide you with their gifts, though the unwilling will make it a painful experience to use them. Izuku replied, so my job is to find troublesome spirits, remove their attachments, bind them to me and then die to send them on. And each spirit I'm bound to will give me a new quirk. Correct, you catch on quickly. When you return to life, I will provide you with a weapon that can end your life quickly and painlessly without injury, so as to make delivering those spirits easier. All that we of the spirit realm ask is for you to do for us what you would do for the humans, become our hero, our symbol of peace. The balance between us all must be maintained, or calamity will befall us all, living and dead. Shinigami clarified, looking at Izuku with a mixture optimism and dread, as if awaiting her refusal. Don't worry Lord Shinigami, I'll do it, I'll be your hero. Izuku simply grinned broadly, her chest constricted with pride and joy. With a genuine smile, Shinigami extended one clawed hand to caress the girl's head. And now I know we made the right choice. To return to the human world from the spirit realm, simply dive beneath the clouds. You'll appear as a ghost, so simply enter your own body. Your guardian spirit will have healed your body to a sustainable level, but be warned, his healing ability is limited and he will not stop you from being scarred. Izuku gave a nod, okay. But Kachan and I are still being held by Jack of Hearts and I can't fight him. Please, I want to save Kachan. It is fine, your guardian spirit, a Nekomata named Sheikah, will allow you to use his gift once you are aware of him. His gift is the creation of blue spirit flames which can protect you from all forms of fire, and the blue fire will make for an effective weapon. Go now, become a hero to both human and spirit, Shinigami instructed, and he used the blade of his cut through the clouds. Izuku inhaled deeply before jumping into the space between the clouds, her green eyes blazing with resolve. Her home city was rapidly approaching, followed by Endor Ward and finally the woods as she felt herself plummeting towards the earth below. She slammed down directly beside her own body, Jack of Hearts smiling maniacally and Kachan frozen in horror, both motionless and immobile. The girl felt a little silly falling face first into the dirt, but the fall had been painless because she was now a spirit. When Izuku looked at her body, she saw that the huge wound on her back had mostly healed, with the exception of a huge patch of skin. Izuku couldn't bring herself to care that the scar from the explosion that killed her would dominate her entire back. A big cat, roughly twice the size of a typical house cat, was sitting next to her. It had glowing, translucent pink fur and two swishing tails that each ended in a ball of blue flame. The cat stared at Izuku's spirit body with eyes that were the same sapphire color as the flames. The Nekomata, who sounded like a younger version of Izuku's mother, Inko Midoriya, said, "So you return. It is good to finally meet you, Lady Izuku. I have watched over you since you were very young. My name is Sheikah, your guardian spirit. I have restored your body as best I can, but I fear it will still be painful when you return. Do not fear for the boy. Time stopped the instant you died and will resume when you breath again." Izuku extended her hand to the cat spirit and said, "Sheikah, thank you. I'm going to need to borrow your gift to save him, will you help me?" Sheikah put her paw on Izuku's palm and smiled like a cat. "Of course my lady, now that you are aware of your gift, the bond between us will allow you to use my gift. It will be as simple as breathing for you," Sheikah clarified. Izuku grinned broadly and exclaimed, "Then let's go," before approaching her body and touching it to form a bond with it and come back to life. As her senses returned to her body and she experienced the roaring pain that engulfed her back, her enthusiasm and determination were somewhat dampened. She bit her tongue so hard that blood was drawn, and it took all of her willpower not to scream. She only had the element of surprise because, even with a quirk now, she was still at a disadvantage against Jack of Hearts. She heard Kachan screaming and sobbing at her, pleading with her to wake up, while the villain laughed and swore at Jack. She was no longer being held to the ground because Jack had taken his hand off of her. Only the collar and hem of her plain white t-shirt remained intact, holding the front of the shirt to her body, while the rest of it was severely scorched and stained with blood. If she had to fight a villain while completely nude, she would never be able to move without the entire thing falling off, even though the back was gone. "Can you hear me? Spirits bound to you can communicate telepathically. Just think at me," Sheikah's voice reverberated in her mind. "I hear you." Izuku tried desperately to ignore the pain as she thought, "We need a plan. Someone is chasing Jack, so we need to stall him and keep him from killing Kachan." She quickly thought of a plan. She didn't know what other quirks Jack had acquired from his stolen hearts, but she assumed he had some sort of quick movement ability because of his earlier arrival. To prevent him from blowing up Kachan again, the first step was to remove him from her. The concussive force can still cause harm, but my gift will shield you from the heat and fire of the explosions, Sheikah cautioned. Izuku grinned to herself. The time had come for her to implement her plan. Izuku jumped to her feet as quickly as she could manage, shocking Jack and Kachan as she sprang in the direction of the hand that was holding Kachan down. She summoned a blue fireball and struck Jack's arm, setting his hoodie sleeve on fire and causing him to recoil in agony as she felt the warmth of Sheikah's flames approaching her hand. The villain snarled, "Aghh. Bitch, why are you alive?" He released Kachan's arms, allowing the boy to move away and stand next to Izuku. With a command, "Run!" he grabbed Izuku and fled from the villain, using his free hand to set off explosions that propelled the two of them ahead. In order to propel herself forward, Izuku imitated Katsuki by placing her free hand behind her and producing a stream of blue flames. Jack unleashed his rapid movement quirk and caught up to the escaping kids. "That brat said she was quirkless. Good news, boy. I guess you'll get to have her heart as company after all. Right after I rip it out in front of you," he roared. Izuku commanded, "Kachan, swing me at him." The boy retorted, "What? No time to argue. Just do it, please." Kachan scowled but did as he was told, spinning on his heel and swinging the little girl back and forth at the villain with all of his strength. Aiming for the stolen hearts the villain had sewn to his body, Izuku gathered as much fire as she could and threw it all at his chest. In that moment, Izuku noticed that Jack was surrounded by dozens of odd black shapes, monochromatic humans, and even strange-looking animals. As Jack cried out in agony from the flames, she thought, the spirits of his victims. As the hearts were destroyed by the flames, the spirits disappeared one by one in flashes of golden light until there was only one spirit left, a glowing green sparrow. Izuku halted the fire because she was afraid Jack would perish if she went on. Just a few feet away from where Jack collapsed to the ground, Katsuki and Izuku were standing. Every single heart the villain had stolen was gone, reduced to ash on the forest floor, and his hoodie was a jumble of loose fabric and ash. His right arm and chest were also covered in blistered red skin from the flames. He whimpered in pain, "Why you fucking bitch, it took months to gather all those hearts." At the end of his sentence, "I'm going to make this hurt, I'm going to make you scream." As Jack lunged at them, Kachan dragged Izuku along with him, but the villain never reached them. Instead, a blur of red, white, blue, and yellow sent him hurtling through the trees. "It's all right now. Why? Because I am here. All Might, Uncle Toshi." Before his smile wavered at Izuku's ragged appearance, the #1 hero turned and smiled down at the two kids. The man hurried to the girl and turned her around gently, ignoring Kachan, who was perplexed by Izuku calling this guy Uncle Toshi. His smile vanished entirely as she gazed at the terrible burns on the girl's back. The girl was only able to stay conscious despite the pain because of her willpower and adrenaline. So that her uncle wouldn't think Kachan intentionally hurt her, Izuku hastily clarified, "It was Jack of Hearts. He caught us and used Kachan's quirk to hurt me." All Might turned to face the villain with a raged expression, but he was unconscious against a tree. All Might was unable to combat him, so he turned back to Katsuki and Izuku. All Might spat the last word like poison. "Young Bakugo, I see you took out the villain's stolen hearts. That was very good. Now let's get you both to a hospital. The police will be along in a moment to arrest the villain." Taking care not to touch Izuku's wounds, the big hero placed Katsuki on his shoulders and gently lifted both of them into his arms. Izuku grinned and felt the soft hug as the adrenaline wore off and she started to lose consciousness. "You did well, my lady," Sheikah remarked. The spirits that were bound to earth by their resentment of that villain were able to return to the wheel on their own by destroying those hearts and defeating him. "Now take a nap." Izuku grinned broadly and dozed off contentedly. In order to avoid aggravating Izuku's injury, All Might kept silent and ran as fast as he could in the direction of the hospital. The hero's smile widened as Izuku's soft breathing turned into purring snores. "It seems the little lady is quite tuckered out from her ordeal. Young boy, would you kindly fill me in on what happened? If you feel up to it, that is." Ignoring All Might's question, Katsuki asked, "You're Toshinori, right?" In shock, the pro-hero nearly stumbled and said, What are you talking about?" Bakugo scowled, "I'm not stupid. Deku, I mean Izuku, called you Uncle Toshi when you arrived, and you called me, young Bakugo, even though Izuku called me Kachan." With a sigh and a nod, the now exposed Toshinori jolted Bakugo, saying, I had hoped that in the excitement you would have missed those slips. I hope you understand why such a thing is a secret and why it must remain such." With a nod, Katsuki recalled his earlier encounters with Toshinori Yagi and said, "Yeah, I get it. I won't tell anyone." Inko Midoriya had known the man since childhood and he had been like a big brother to her. Initially, he was buff, not All Might buff, but Katsuki assumed that was part of his quirk and occasionally appeared to visit Inko and Izuku. However, a few months ago, he suffered a severe injury that left him nearly skeletal and with a terrible wound on his side. He had then, at Inko's insistence, moved in with the Midoriya family. "Was it a villain that hurt you and made you all bony and crap?" The mighty laughed. "Indeed it was, though I came out better than the villain. Unfortunately I can only maintain my muscular form for roughly 6 hours a day, but that's more than enough for me to save people. Now, can you tell me what happened?" Obediently, Katsuki reported everything that had transpired between Jack's attack and the arrival of All Might. When Katsuki told him that her quirk had appeared, the hero was ecstatic and he didn't miss the happiness in Katsuki's voice as he reported that her quirk was similar to his, angry at the villain for using Katsuki to harm her, and proud of Izuku's attempt to save the boy. As All Might arrived at the edge of Koruso Ward, which is home to the city's best hospital, he gazed proudly at his sleeping niece but scowled when he felt Katsuki's fingers dig into his shoulders. All Might questioned, "Is everything alright, my boy? Are you hiding an injury?" All Might would never have expected the boy's voice to waver as he said, "No. It's Deku Izuku. When my quirk hurt her, I watched her. She didn't pass out. I saw it, the life left her eyes. I'm sure of it, for a moment, I'm sure she died." All Might was about to freeze. "Young Bakugo, are you certain? This could change what I say to the doctors. Could you be mistaken?" "I'm sure." She screamed, and I could smell smoke and burning flesh. Bakugo gulped down the bile that was the recollection. There was so much blood, and for a moment, Izuku just slumped over and died. The wound on her back wasn't just a bad burn, there was a hole. But then suddenly, the wound healed to what it is now and she sprang up and used that quirk like she'd always known about it. It was like she was a different person and she wasn't afraid at all. Izuku was carefully moved to rest on one arm so that All Might could use the other to reach up and pat Katsuki's head. Despite his slight complaint, the boy leaned into the touch. "Thank you for telling me this, young Bakugo." Katsuki was blushing. "Don't thank me, I was real crappy to Izuku. I treated her bad because she didn't have a quirk, but even before her quirk came out, she was the only one to try and help. All my other friends ran away. If I have to go home before she wakes up, can you tell her I'm sorry? And that I was wrong?" As he entered the hospital, Toshinori nodded and said, "I will. I don't approve of how you acted, but it takes courage to admit what you did wrong and apologize, though I recommend telling her herself, it will mean more." The two children were taken by doctors and nurses almost immediately, and Izuku was taken to surgery. All Might questioned Katsuki as the chief physician hurriedly examined him. "What is it that you were wrong about?" "That she couldn't be a hero. If she can do that stuff for me, then she definitely can, but I'll still be number one, so she'll have to settle for number two." Katsuki screamed, trying to regain his pride, as his face turned tomato red and he swallowed. As the doctors escorted the boy to another room for examination, All Might let out a loud laugh and gave the boy the thumbs up. All Might withdrew to a restroom to transform back into his civilian form after the boy had vanished from view. As he took out his phone, his smile dimmed a little. He had to call Inko, and if what he suspected Katsuki had said was true, he would also need to call Agent Necropolis from the government in Nezu at UA. After 3 days, Izuku found herself looking down at her own body when she eventually came to. She let out a startled yelp before the fight with Jack of Hearts resurfaced in her mind. She turned to see the green bird that had followed Jack sitting on the IV stand next to Izuku's hospital bed and Chika sleeping on the pillow next to her head. Feeling strange, Izuku hovered around, taking in her surroundings and asking, why am I not in my body? Did I die again?" In order to avoid aggravating her burn, her body was resting on its front in a private hospital room. Sitting quietly next to Izuku's mother was observing her sleep. At that moment, Izuku realized two crucial things. Time was still passing, unlike when she had died at Jack's hands, and the heart monitor attached to her body was still beeping, indicating that she was indeed still alive. Chika raised her head. "No, you're not dead, my lady. When you are on the verge of waking up, you can leave your body and experience life as a spirit for a while." This can be useful to speak with spirits that aren't bound to you, and you can even possess humans. Though you won't be able to control them, it's more like a mutual exchange of emotions. You can do this after dying too if you don't enter your body straight away. Izuku nodded. I see. Would you mind just calling me Izuka? It feels weird to be called my lady all the time. But that would be terribly disrespectful. I am your guardian spirit and servant, Chika said, looking scandalized, at least as scandalized as a cat. Izuka poked her fingers together shyly and said, I'd rather we be friends, if you want to, that is. Her ability to form friendships was never strong. If it would please you, I can try. Please don't be upset if I slip though, agreed Chika. In an unexpectedly masculine tone, the Green Sparrow tweeted, I'd like to be your friend too. You kicked that bastard's ass and freed my sister's soul from him. I owe you a lot. My name is Taka. The tweet sounded like laughter. Like a hawk, Izuka asked with a laugh. His cheeks were puckered up. I know, right? I was called Taka as a human, and when I died and my spirit became a yokai, I became a freaking sparrow. It's not fair. But seriously though, you did me a great favor by destroying my sister's stolen heart. With an air of authority, Chika questioned, what is your story, Taka? Oh, my story isn't anything special. I died when I was 19 from cancer. Sucks, but I had a good life for as long as it lasted. But the specific type 1 had runs in my family, so I lingered on Earth to watch my 7-year-old sister and see if she got it too. Her quirk was this really cool rapid movement ability that let her nearly teleport short distances, but it caught that bastard Jack's attention. He murdered her and stole her heart, which forced her poor spirit to follow him. Eventually I noticed the other spirits around the bastard warp and change, and the same happened to my Chisa. She wasn't even human anymore by the time you freed her. But still, thanks to you she was able to move on to the next life, and I figured I could either follow her and hope to be reincarnated alongside her, or I could follow you and repay the debt I owe you. Taka clarified. Chika looked to Izuka. It seems that Taka's perceived debt has bound him to you in the same way as your quirk. He is of no threat as he is now, but you can force him to move on if you wish. Keeping him would allow you to use his gift, which would be whatever quirk he had in life. I could fly. It was pretty neat, but unlike other quirks that give flight, it was just flight, not like wind manipulation or anything. Taka clarified. Izuka switched into her analysis mumble mode, and said, so he could fly. Makes sense with the similarities to his sister's quirk. Is the flight due to wing-type mutations or a psychic ability? Maybe low-level wind or momentum generation from the feet. And as a yokai, he became a bird. Maybe there's a connection between a person's quirk and the form they take as a yokai. Chika is a nekomata, which is symbolized in mythology as blue fire, so it makes sense that a flight quirk would have a bird-based yokai form. Does she typically do this? Taka asked, turning to face Chika. Yes, she does this a lot. I've watched her for a large portion of her life. With a cat smirk, Chika said, but at least it shows she thinks you're interesting. Lady Izuka, you're right about the connection between a yokai and the gift they give. Humans with gifts that transform into yokai take on forms that resemble their gifts, and yokai from before the age of gifts frequently gave gifts that mirrored their own abilities. Returning to her normal self, Izuka said, I see. In any case, Taka, I'm going to have to begin a yokai analysis notebook series. Do you really think you can stay with me? I won't take offense if you want me to release you at any time. I was only doing what I had to do to survive, so I don't really think you owe me anything. I'm positive, until you decide to move on or get rid of me, I won't leave you. As he landed on Izuka's palm and inflated his chest, Taka uttered those words. Izuka rubbed the sparrow against her cheek while giggling and said, all right. Together, let's help a lot of people. While Chika grinned and joyfully swished her twin tails, Taka chirped with pleasure. Looking at the clock, Izuka saw that it was 11 a.m. and decided that it would be best to wake up now and save her mother some worry. Izuka then floated into her own body while Chika and Taka made themselves scarce to give Izuka privacy, though they couldn't wander more than a kilometer away. Izuka turned back to her mother and realized that it would be difficult to explain all of this to her mother and Uncle Toshi, but she owed them explanations, and probably Kachan as well. Izuka's head felt fuzzy and her back was tight and sore when she regained consciousness in her own body. She twisted as slowly as she could and sat down as her mother yelled, Izuka. You're conscious. I worried so much about you. Do you feel any pain? Shall I give the doctor a call? I should. Of course. Hold on tight, I'll get him. Wait, Mom, Izuku said, almost laughing at her mother's extreme worry. I'm okay. It's sore, but not really hurting anymore. I don't want to worry you, dear, but Katsuki told Toshinori about what happened when that monster hurt you, Inko sighed. Thank goodness. Katsuki and his parents are also present, and your uncle Toshi has called a few people to speak with you. With a slight grimace, Izuku said, well, I guess they're all really worried too. I'm really okay, Mom, so you can tell them I'm awake. She had hoped for a little more time to correct her story, but it appeared that she had been denied that opportunity. I would prefer to finish this. As she stood up to gather Izuku's guests, Inko said, not seeming particularly convinced, all right honey, if you're sure. But the doctor is going to look at you first. Uncle Toshi in his civilian form, Katsuki and his parents, Mitsuki and Masaru, and an odd couple that Izuku had never seen before. A short white mouse or bear or dog, in a suit with a scarred eye and a very gaunt-looking man in a white suit with deep black bags under his drooping eyes, entered as the doctor was just finishing her examination. She has recovered remarkably well, but more than half of her back will be permanently scarred. The doctor grinned as she patted Izuku's head after unplugging her IV and all the other unnecessary machines. Thanks to healing quirks and her own resilience, little Izuku will be able to leave today, and she'll only need an anti-infection cream and bandages for a few days until the skin fully heals. After Inko and Toshi thanked the doctor, Toshinori cleared his throat and said, all right, Izuku, I hate to do this so soon after you've woken up after your ordeal, but young Bakugo told me some worrying things, including that you manifested a quirk. Kachan winced at the thought of the scar. I did, but it's a bit of a long story, Izuku said, nodding. Looking warily at the mouse and the gaunt man, she said, I was hoping to keep most of it secret. It's kind of hard to believe. Oh, don't worry about these two, please. This is Agent Necropolis, a government official who handles the registration of some quirks, and Principal Nezu, the principal of UA. Hi, Toshinori clarified. My quirk and the kinds of quirks I deal with are the kind that allow a person to resurrect from the dead, said Agent Necropolis, the gaunt man, in a startlingly positive tone. My codename, Necropolis, comes from my own quirk, which enables me to instantly determine if someone is dead as long as I know their true name, and to resurrect myself if I die from trauma. So there are other quirks that allow you to come back to life? Izuku asked, unable to resist. While the adults were looking shocked, Agent Necropolis grinned a little and said, so Bakugo's assumption was right, you were killed by Jack of Hearts. Inko whimpered and nearly passed out, but Mitsuki Bakugo grabbed her and helped her into a chair. Mitsuki frowned and said, this is some pretty messed up shit, to think a little girl like Izuku was murdered and came back. I wasn't the first little girl he killed, nor the youngest, Izuku said, clenching her fists. Necropolis stated, you're right about that, Chisa Hado was 7 years old when she was murdered. However, the general public is unaware of this information. The Hado family requested that it remain silent because they had already lost a son to cancer and didn't want the media to bother them. Thus, in some way, you not only survived death but also gained knowledge that shouldn't have been possible. Miss Midoriya, please tell us everything you know. The group's expressions shifted quickly between shock, horror, amazement, and rage at Jack. At one point, Chika spoke up and told Izuku that she could make her bonded yokai visible if she concentrated, though they couldn't be heard or touched, only seen, which she promptly did to show both Chika and Taka to her listeners. Midoriya nodded and took a deep breath before telling the group everything that had happened from the moment they entered the woods of Endor Ward until she passed out in All Might's arms, and then the brief exchange with Taka when she first woke up. Necropolis took out his notebook after she finished, saying, well, I can attest that everything she said is true. The clouds, the golden sky, and the precise description of the Shinigami are the same scene reported by everyone who has experienced a form of afterlife after passing away and before rising again. I have personally seen this scene. What does this signify, then? You won't attempt to remove her, will you? Fearfully, Inko put herself between the man and her daughter and asked. Obviously not. All my office does is change the public classification to either quirkless or a reflection of another aspect of their quirk, while keeping her actual quirk hidden. Because you can't really put a villain on death row if they simply resurrect after being executed, we also use it to keep track of people who have similar peculiarities and turn into villains. In relation to that, Jack of Hearts was put on death row for killing 12 people, including Chisa Hado, who was 7 years old. Since he killed you, Izuku, he was technically charged with 13 murders. You could say that it was his unlucky 13th, Necropolis informed her. Izuku and Katsuki swallowed, and the adults appeared torn between surprise and satisfaction. The death penalty was extremely uncommon in modern times and could not be applied to any crime if the offender was thought to have regret. The courts are usually pretty slow with villains because it takes time to tabulate all their crimes, and many try to hold up the process in hopes of getting lesser sentences or the statute of limitations running out on certain crimes, Toshinori said with a grim nod. But Jack was proud and boastful and happily confessed, even giving explicit details in a joyful voice at his hearing. The judge's request for an immediate sentence was approved. That monster will never be able to harm anyone again because of you, Izuku. Well, at least that's good. However, is it possible to temporarily halt his execution? Izuku said in a faltering voice, the confidence she had accumulated starting to wane. If he dies with a grudge or obsession, he could become a yokai, and I'd rather not deal with him again until I've got more used to this. Necropolis nodded and said, I'll do my best. Speaking of the work Shinigami has assigned you, since it helps the world as well, I'll look into getting you a quirk license so you can use your quirks in public without fear of repercussions. Regretfully, I will have to ask you to write up any reports of encounters with yokai or spirits for us. Simply give them to Toshinori, and he will forward them to me. If we encounter something we think is unearthly, the government might also ask you for assistance. Toshinori would never allow anything bad to happen to her Izuku, and if he trusted Necropolis, then so would she. Inko appeared to want to protest, but she chose to remain silent in light of the possible risks facing her daughter. Masaru Bakugo then spoke up. I don't mean to be impolite, but why is my family here? Why even tell us if this is meant to be a secret? Why us? Inko and Mr. Yagi make sense. He inquired. Well, you see, after seeing young Izuku's resurrection ability, it appears your son was able to piece it together on his own, so my office would need to keep an eye on him. Because of this, we believed that Izuku would be better off confiding in someone her own age who was, in the know, as it were. Regarding you and your spouse, it is customary to notify the parents of any minor child of any secrets they have learned, both for the purpose of transparency and to ensure that someone can assume accountability in the event that the child proves to be unreliable, Necropolis explained. Mitsuki grumbled, so basically you're telling us so that we can be held accountable if our kid spills the beans. Necropolis grinned and said, basically. It goes without saying that non-disclosure agreements must be signed by each person present. The Bakugo family's frustrated looks made Izuku laugh, and the upbeat sound seemed to cheer them up. Mitsuki ruffled the girl's hair and said, well, it's fine. You were the only one of my brat's dirtbag friends who didn't leave him, after all. Were you aware that none of them made any calls to the police? All of them simply ran home. Little brats. Izuku half-heartedly defended, I'm sure they were just really scared. Mitsuki simply grinned and gave her a gentle hug. This world cannot handle your innocence. How did a girl like you become friends with my brat? Katsuki snarled, hag, stop talking. And we weren't friends until that shit fell. Because she lacked a quirk, I was a jerk. I referred to her as Deku and insulted her. Izuku, I'm only saying this once, so listen. He said, losing some of his rage as he spoke, turning to the girl in question, his face turning into an unfathomable mixture of shame, jealousy, and rage. I apologize for being such a jerk. And I was mistaken. You can be a hero if you want to be, and I'm not saying that because you have a quirk, but rather because you saved my ass despite my taunts. Don't try to outdo me, though, because I will always be number one. Only you could make an apology sound like you're scolding her. Mitsuki moaned as Masaru bowed apologetically to Inko, who was surprisingly amenable to Katsuki's confession and subsequent apology. Oh, you little brat, be humble. Even though her eyes gleamed with pride, Mitsuki screamed as he struck her son on the head. Izuku grinned so broadly that her cheeks started to ache and tears of joy welled up in her eyes. Using Taka's power, she rose oblivious to the glowing green feathers that appeared behind her and then disappeared again, and flew at Kachan, embracing him firmly. The boy tensed up and tried to push her away when he saw the bandages on her back, which were visible through the open back of her hospital gown. Izuku, the quirkless little Deku, had literally died for him, and that was the wound she received from his quirk after risking her life to save him. Katsuki gave her a gentle hug in return because he couldn't bring himself to push her away. Soon after, the Bakugo family left to give the Midoriyas some alone time before they left for home. Necropolis also excused himself, leaving only Inko, Izuku, Toshinori, and Nezu after a quick lunch brought in by some amiable nurses complete with extra servings of ice cream for Izuku. At one point, Toshi and Nezu vanished for a short while before returning with determined looks. Nezu cleared his throat and said, "Toshinori called me here initially after learning about your fire quirk, but now that we know you'll probably have more than one quirk, my purpose has grown. In essence, I'm extending an invitation to visit UA whenever you'd like to use our facilities for private quirk training. When you get to high school, I'll even extend this invitation to a full recommendation to UA if you accept Toshinori's offer and demonstrate your worth." Really? Izuku nearly jumped with excitement as she half screamed. Obviously. Nezu grinned and said, "I believe you could make a great hero. Toshinori has an offer for you because he feels the same way." "Toshi, are you sure?" Inko asked, turning to face Toshinori, the man who had been her older brother for years. "We've talked about it, but why now? Why after all this trouble?" "I was waiting to see if Izuku really had a heroic spirit," Toshinori said, stroking his chin. "I knew she admired heroes and wished to aid others, but that is all for nothing when you are confronted with evildoers and suffering. By rescuing young Bakugo and fending off the villain long enough for me to arrive, Izuku demonstrated her strength against Jack." "Izuku, what were your thoughts when you took action to save young Bakugo? How did you feel or think?" Startled by the unexpected inquiry, Izuku nearly hid behind Nezu and said, "I'm not sure. My body simply moved by itself. And that proves you have the spirit of a hero," smiled Toshinori. "You are therefore deserving of being my heir, the one for all holder and the new symbol of peace." As Toshinori described his quirk, one for all, and how it was passed down, Izuku listened in awe. It would grant her the power of all might, and when paired with her yokai's gifts and her ability to rise from the dead, it would transform Izuku into the ultimate hero, capable of saving everyone, whether they were human, spirit, or yokai. Sheikah had enthusiastically accepted after quickly verifying that one for all wouldn't conflict with her other quirk, which Necropolis had previously called spirit scales. Izuku would train her body, use her yokai quirks to help spirits and yokai, and strive to become a great hero from that point until it was time for her high school entrance exams. One day, she would shout to heaven and earth, "It's okay now." Why? Due to the arrival of Izuku Midoriya. After the fateful day that Izuku found her true quirk and started her life as a hero in training for both humans and spirits, 6 years went by. Her small family had grown to include the Bakugos and, somewhat surprisingly, Toshinori's former teacher, Gran Torino, who soon took on the role of a pseudo-grandfather to both Izuku and Katsuki. Both kids had trained extensively with him and All Might, frequently making use of the UA facilities. For Kachan, this was a priceless opportunity to train the limits of his body and quirk while also gaining a foothold at UA and possibly receiving a recommendation from one of the many hero teachers. Izuku, whose yokai partners granted her complete control over their gifts, used this to practice techniques and combinations with her gifts and to prepare her body for one for all. She also learned some martial arts to compensate for her lack of skill in hand-to-hand combat. Izuku diligently adhered to All Might's training regimen, and with the assistance of the UA teachers, she was judged physically capable of using one for all safely by the age of 13 after 4 years of training. She was able to fully train with the quirk for 2 years in order to prepare for the entrance exam. Although she kept her quirks a secret and was still viewed as quirkless by her teachers and classmates, her life at school had also improved. Izuku was better without a quirk than all of them with quirks. Katsuki had yelled angrily at his friends on the first day back at school after the incident for leaving him without even seeking assistance. After the news spread that the girl had saved Katsuki, the teachers had been pleased with Katsuki's U-turn regarding Izuku and had given her a small award for her heroism, although, of course, the public narrative was simply that she had battled valiantly without a quirk until All Might arrived. When Katsuki personally presented the award, he gave Izuku one of his very infrequent sincere and non-threatening smiles, which almost caused Izuku to cry as she gave him a strong embrace. After the incident, Katsuki underwent a significant transformation. Initially, he was cautious around her and insisted on carrying her backpack until at least a month after her back wound had completely healed. Even though he still occasionally called her Deku, it evolved into a loving nickname that was intended to tease her rather than to be offensive. If any of the poor bastards in her class used it, Kachan would almost instantly lose his temper and nearly exterminate the offending student. Izuku was always able to control him, and the boy would always be rewarded for his good deeds with a cheerful smile. For the rough and tumble boy, it felt a little ridiculous, but every one of those smiles would make him feel like a hero. Naturally, even though Katsuki started acting like Izuku's overbearing big brother, he never gave up on his goal of becoming number one, only admitting that he would be content to share the position as a hero team with Izuku as long as his name received top billing. Izuku obtained a quirk license, level 2 outside of school and training, allowing her to use her quirk in public to combat small-time criminals and save lives in the event of a disaster in the absence of other assistance. She was forbidden from engaging in more hazardous activities or fighting villains, and to be honest, she hardly ever needed it. Covering her face, flying into burning buildings, and using Chika's fireproof abilities to withstand the flames while saving trapped civilians constituted the majority of Izuku's bravery. She was sent back without even a scar, just a bump on her head and a slight crick in her neck, after the first time had ended badly with the ceiling collapsing on her head and killing her. The Shinigami had given her a gentle reprimand to be more cautious. She had been more cautious ever since. Furthermore, Lord Shinigami had fulfilled his promise by teaching Izuku how to use her quirk to summon a unique knife that could be stabbed into her heart to kill her painlessly and without harm, and that would fade through all solid objects. She had delivered spirits she had assisted to the afterlife a few times using it. Her work with spirits and yokai had been more successful than her work with humans. Sometimes it was more difficult, but most of the time she just needed to assist a spirit by helping them solve their problems or communicating a message to their loved ones, usually by allowing the spirit to take possession of her so they could write a note in their own handwriting. When Izuku was 11 years old, she had to destroy the spirit of a little boy who had gone insane and turned into a feral yokai while looking for his mother. It was a tragic event. For a few weeks, that had depressed her, but Katsuki and her guardian yokai soon lifted her spirits. Speaking of guardian yokai, in the 6 years since Jack of Hearts, Izuku's small group had grown from 2 to 4 spirits. Samahata, a yokai that assumed the shape of a glowing blue shark, was the first. He had been a fisherman all his life and hunted fish with a harpoon using his underwater breathing quirk. He drowned a few years ago after being pulled to the bottom by a great white shark, and his resentment of the animal was so intense that he not only remained on Earth but also assumed the form of the creature as his yokai. His death had been straight out of Moby Dick. Only by tracking down and killing the shark, which the Coast Guard had actually wanted for killing a few civilians, could Izuku make amends, gain Samahata's respect, and convince the shark yokai to stay with Izuku so she could breathe underwater. The second spirit she acquired was One for All, which was a special circumstance. As it turned out, a quirk that transferred some of its owner's strength to another person also transferred some of their spirit. 9 people, including Izuku, wielded One for All, which combined their departed souls into a single, somewhat schizophrenic personality. A similar thing had happened with One for All, Chika explained, adding that occasionally spirits were formed when the pieces of destroyed spirits fused together until they were powerful enough to acquire form. It assumed the shape of a kyubi, a golden-furred 9-tailed fox with a tiny red flame at the end of each tail. Each flame contained a kanji that represented the tail's number. When One for All used a particular wielder's voice and personality, the corresponding tail number would glow blue, much like Chika's flames. One for All was behaving like a typical fox, playing in nonverbal when all the flames were red. Izuku had only been able to name 3 of the yokai's personalities: a shy but self-assured young girl, a heroic man who frequently punctuated his sentences with English words All Might, and a proud, upbeat, and incredibly happy woman. He had convinced All Might that this specific personality was that of Nana Shimura, his master and forebear. Although the girl felt a much stronger bond with the Kyubi yokai than she did with her other yokai partners, the other personalities hardly ever came out, and One for All mostly just behaved like a typical fox, following Izuku around like a devoted pet. After a quite hectic 6 years, Izuku finally woke up with a smile on her face on the day of the UA entrance exams. Despite her muscles, the now 15-year-old girl was still slender and had a slight frame. She had also grown a lot and filled out somewhat. She wore a pale green tracksuit for the exam today, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail at the same length as usual. Despite being assured of a spot in UA's hero department and having received hero recommendations from All Might and Nezu, she and Kachan chose to take the exam in order to test themselves. Izuku emerged from her bedroom to find Uncle Toshi and Kachan seated at the table, and her mother rushing around the kitchen. With Samahata swimming through the air above Inko, watching the woman cook, Taka sitting in Kachan's hair, though the boy was unaware, and Chika in her favorite spot by the window, her yokai partners were dispersed throughout the apartment. The cunning fox, who was always there but concealed even from Izuku, which is why she hadn't met him until she inherited him, had vanished as usual. As she served the food, Inko said, "Izuku, good morning dear, are you all set for today?" Beside the refrigerator, 2 lunchboxes were prepared and wrapped in anticipation of Izuku and Kachan. As she assisted her mother in setting the table with food, Izuku grinned and said, "I'm great. I'm planning on getting some work in before heading to the exam." Kachan grunted gratefully and began to eat, while Toshinori grinned and thanked him. "Did Necropolis deliver anything new?" Toshinori handed Izuku a small stack of folders and nodded, saying, "Indeed he did, my girl. I looked through a couple of the reports he dropped off and put the best on top." After taking a few bites, she started to examine them, paying particular attention to the one her uncle had marked for her. "The exam isn't until 2 p.m., so I think you could manage that job with some help from young Bakugo." Kachan smiled. He enjoyed participating in yokai hunts because the few spirits he was able to assist in fighting were typically difficult but defeatable, providing him with a challenge. Izuku found it more challenging because in order to allow him to see and touch the spirits, he had to keep Kachan attached to her like a spirit. "Great, a warm-up before the test sounds good. I've been itching to blow shit up for days." With a sigh, Inko gave Katsuki a gentle pat on the head with a newspaper and wrote, "Language Katsuki." The boy said, Sorry auntie." Katsuki could not keep up his typical aggression because Inko was too similar to Izuku. "Women of Midoriya, damn you." Izuku grinned and returned her focus to the file at the top of the stack, which contained a number of reports and, intriguingly, a tabloid magazine with extensive annotations. Unexpectedly, tabloids were a useful resource for identifying possible yokai sites. She handed Kachan the magazine and said, "Ghost lights lead lost children out of the woods. That means it's a friendly yokai." "Friendly. Damn it, if I can't fight it then why would I be needed?" Katsuki glared at All Might in frustration. "Look at the locations of the incidents," Toshinori said with a smile. Leaning over the reports, Izuku and Katsuki's eyes widened. The woods of Endor Ward, the starting point. Toshinori nodded as they looked back at him. "You've both come so far and today will be your first step onto the path of becoming a hero. I thought it would be a good idea for you both to see how far you've come and reflect on your progress before you advance even further." As she released a pulse of her quirk to make her yokai visible to the other humans in the room, though they couldn't be heard or touched unless she created a soul tether bond, Izuku grinned and gave Toshinori a hug. "I think it's a good idea. Plus, that place is where Kachan and I became friends again and where I met Chika and Taka." She exclaimed joyfully. While Samahata smiled broadly and a distant yip expressed one for all's approval, the 2 yokai meowed or chirped their approval. Inko then gave Izuku a big embrace and kissed her cheeks before giving Kachan a supportive hug as well. Grinning, Toshinori pledged to keep a close eye on their tests. The 2 then headed back to the starting point of their adventures, Endor Ward, with well wishes still fresh in their minds. As usual, Katsuki led the way. He glanced over his shoulder at Izuku, who was reading the ghost light reports again, and said, "Give me all the details." He punched his palm, which caused smoke to appear. Katsuki was taller and stronger than he had been as a child, but he was also less violent. Well, a little less violent, and his personality had softened somewhat. "Okay, according to what Necropolis wrote in his own report, the spirit in question takes the form of a fireball that gives off heat but doesn't seem to burn. It has only appeared to children that were lost in the woods at night, though it isn't believed to be a nocturnal spirit. No one has been hurt by it and aside from the children it helped, no one has seen it." Izuku began to read. Katsuki grinned and said, Got anything in your yokai decks?" Izuku rolled her eyes and produced a small device that was essentially a phone-sized black laptop that was loaded with a global database of myths and legends. Since it was used to communicate with Necropolis and his agency at the government, it was actually known as her agency link. However, because of its resemblance to the original Pokédex from Pokémon, Katsuki named it a yokai dex. There are a handful of spirits that look possible. Corpse lights are an option. Oh, there's also a Filipino spirit called an alawag that is said to appear as a fire that doesn't burn, though it says here that they lead people into pits and swamps to die. Izuku sighed. Chika meowed and said, "Don't believe everything you read. Humans sometimes get it wrong, or this spirit may go against the nature of its kind." Izuku hoped that was the case and nodded. The 2 teenagers lived in Teituan Ward, which was close to Endor Ward, so they soon found themselves in the woods. Silently, the two strolled along the well-known path, recalling all the times they had visited this place prior to Jack of Hearts' attack. Even though they hadn't been back in the area for 6 years, the scars were still visible. When Izuku and Katsuki fled, Jack threw his burning hoodie at the old shack, turning it into cold ash. Trees were broken where Jack had been smashed through by All Might. Izuku looked around with a nostalgic smile, but Katsuki wasn't feeling particularly joyful. As she flitted past him, Izuku made inane remarks about things she remembered from their early years, but Kachan could only glance at the girl's back. Katsuki thought he could see the scar that now marred her otherwise smooth skin, even through her tracksuit and the shirt underneath. For months following that day, he suffered from nightmares, waking up in a cold sweat, the memory of Izuku's scream echoing in his ears, and the stench of charred flesh clinging to his nostrils. This location served as both a reminder of his progress and his biggest embarrassment, the time when the quirk he took such pride in was used to murder his only real friend. Even though Izuku is still alive, her memories did not quickly fade. A faint warmth touched the back of Katsuki's neck as he was lost in thought. As he turned, he saw a massive ruby flame burning far behind him. He cried out in shock at the flame, "Izuku, I think I found it." Before raising her hands as though the flame were a wild animal and she was attempting to demonstrate her safety, Izuku ran toward him. In order to effectively communicate with the yokai, Izuku and Katsuki swiftly established a soul tether. "Spirit, can you hear us? Can you speak?" The flame changed shape, flickered, and warped. Uncurling, the ball of flame took the shape of a great wolf, complete with ruby red eyes, red jagged claws, and a gleaming red horn that protruded from its forehead, jagged and razor sharp. The spirit said in a deep, compassionate voice, "Children, you speak with spirits. Are you lost?" Jumping down in front of the wolf, Chika said, "This girl, Lady Izuku, is the hero of yokai. She helps yokai that can't move on to the afterlife." The wolf paused for a moment before nodding. "I see. I have been lost for a while and have roamed these woods for the last year. In my homeland, the children would sometimes call me an alawag, and while my other form may resemble one, I rejected the cruel trickery of my kind. I do in death what I did in life and lead the lost back to their homes." Speaking more to Chika than the wolf, Katsuki asked bluntly, "Huh, so he is one of those alawag things. Kind of weird he can be a wolf spirit too, and aren't these things Filipino? What's one doing in Japan?" "The wolf is my true form. It was given to me by the Dewata, the guardian spirit of the forest I originally guarded. I took on the form of an alawag to help guide people. Many lost travelers are more willing to follow a mysterious beacon than a wolf made of flame. Though I admit, making myself visible to the living is difficult." The wolf clarified. Izuku, who had pulled out her notebook and started quickly recording the spirit's every word, nodded along. "Spirit, could I know your name and your story?" The wolf nodded. "Of course. I am Leob." As the young man said, "I am Filipino and was a hunter and guide in one of the great forests. One day, a group of children I was guiding from their campsite was attacked by a herd of wild boars that felt we had entered their territory. I fell and was killed by the boars. I lingered as a spirit instead of moving on, so I could ensure that the children escaped. Thankfully they did, and the Dewata of the forest gave me my current form as a gift. I always loved children as I was never able to have any of my own, and in death, I was bound to both the forest I guarded and the children I saved. The forest was eventually bulldozed for housing, so I took to following the children I had helped. One by one, they passed away until the last one moved to Japan. She lived in this city until she too passed away. I have no more attachments, but I chose to linger here and help others. I ended up wandering this place without a destination and became lost. I found this forest and remain here to guide people out of it." To Katsuki's dismay, Izuku grinned and reached up to stroke Leob's flaming fur. Instead of hurting her, the fire felt like a fluffy, soft pillow in her hands. He turned to face Katsuki and remarked, "My flames will never burn a child, nor will they burn those I protect." The explosive boy, like Izuku, huffed as he ran his hand over the fur that resembled fire and had to fight the impulse to burrow his face in it. Izuku hugged the wolf's head, avoiding his horn, and said, "You know, you look really cool. You've got a regal but intimidating look. It makes me glad to hear you like it. I understand if you need to make me pass on, but I'd rather stay in this world and help protect and guide others. I don't think I'd be able to rest or reincarnate knowing that there are more people I could help." Leob replied, Then you can stay with me and help me, Izuku said with a broad smile. I'm going to be a hero for both humans and spirits, so if you lend me your power, I can help more people. Leob cracked a wolfish grin. Excellent. I'll admit, it's been lonely since the last of those children passed away. They were like my pack. Well, we can be your new pack. You can see my other spirit friends, and Kachan over there can see and touch you when I bond with him. Plus I have a big Kyuubi around here somewhere, but he likes to hide. Izuku replied, continuing to embrace his head. Hey, Wolfie, what's your quirk? She'll be able to use it when you bond with Izuku, said Katsuki, rolling his eyes. My quirk is safe travels. It gives me good luck when traveling and prevents me from getting lost. So long as I keep my destination in mind, I'll always be able to find it. It works for finding people too, though I need to know what they look like. Leob laughed when Izuku gently reprimanded him for being impolite. Katsuki remarked, not exactly cool, but pretty damn useful. Yeah, I'm aiming to be more of a support and rescue hero than one who fights villains, so a power like yours would be amazing. I could find missing people or locate hostages, Izuku stated. Then it's decided. Leob, you'll be with us from now on, claimed Chika, who purred. Excellent. What do I need to do? Leob said, leaning back on his haunches and nodding. Izuku closed her eyes and clasped her hands together as though in prayer, chirping, just hold still. This will feel really tingly. A strange white strand started to emerge from her heart and snake its way through the air towards Leob, where it connected with his own heart, as her body started to glow with a snowy white aura. Before the strand and Izuku's aura abruptly changed to the same ruby color as Leob's flames and vanished, the wolf spirit experienced a wonderful warmth that made him feel as though the girl in front of him was holding his entire body. This completed the bonding process and left behind some of the warm feeling. Uncertain of how to respond, Leob remarked, that was rather pleasant. Does it feel like that often? He asked, wanting to experience the warmth of that process once more. Yeah, whenever I use your quirk it'll feel the same. It's a nice feeling, isn't it? The young woman laughed. Keeping his horn in mind, the wolf simply nodded and pressed his face against the girl's shoulder. Well, not that the giant furball is on your team, you can break the bond with me. I don't need to watch all this sappy crap. Katsuki rolled his eyes and complained. He stopped hearing or feeling the yokai after Izuku simply rolled her eyes and broke their bond, but she continued to show him because it was simple. Hey, why don't we have a picnic here? We can eat the lunch Mom packed and then head to the exam. Izuku offered. The two sat on one of the fallen trees to eat while observing the yokai as they ran around and interacted with one another after Katsuki grunted his agreement. At one point, One for All came up behind the two and stuck his head between them. He then played fight with Leob to show that he was the true leader of Izuku's pack, then rested it on Izuku's lap and took a catnap, fox nap. Izuku giggled and petted the fox in between meals, saying, hee, he's all worked up for the exam. The fox spirit and its relationship to All Mights, now Izuku's quirk, had always baffled Kachan. Kachan had never heard the fox's voice or touched him during his bond with Izuku because he had never spoken to him or approached him. However, Izuku reassured him that he felt no different from Sheikah's fur, and even Izuku was not permitted to touch the tail flames. With an unusually serious expression, Katsuki asked, you planning on using him? When Izuku first started using One for All, he recalled how frequently she broke bones. A year had passed before she could distribute its power evenly throughout her body at 5%, and another year before she could passively increase it to 10% and, if she pushed her body to its limits, 20%. The peculiar quirk did not sit well with the explosive boy. I might do. It's been a while and I think he gets testy if I wait too long to use him. All Uncle Toshi and the UA teachers told me was that the normal entrance exam involved fighting. If it's machines, I think it would be okay, but I don't want to use him against people. Izuku responded by providing One with a cherry tomato for everyone. One for All appeared to behave more like a real fox than a spirit, in contrast to her other yokai, and he had no trouble interacting with the physical world when he felt like it, including eating. According to Chika's theory, it was because he was a hybrid of a living thing and a spirit rather than a naturally occurring spirit. As Katsuki finished his meal, he grumbled, your uncle is a tight ass when it comes to the exam. I was drilling him all morning and he wouldn't say shit. Shortly after Izuku finished, the two of them packed up and started to slowly leave the woods and make their way to UA. Often referred to as the heart of the city, the prestigious school was located in the center of Musudafu, Izuku's hometown, and had its own ward. Izuka and Katsuki had met many of the employees during their training there, including Present Mike, recovery girl who was mainly responsible for helping Izuka recover from one-for-all training, Smintos, Midnight, and Lunch Rush. Although they had never met them, the two teenagers were aware that many other people worked there. Izuka didn't know why, but All Might was very particular that she avoid people named Aizawa, even though the name didn't sound familiar. She didn't think she would recognize his real name over his hero name, though, if he was a pro hero. The teens arrived at UA to find the entrance crowded with people, primarily parents wishing their kids luck. The crowd was startled by Katsuki's sudden explosion, which let him and Izuka pass through, although Izuka turned and bowed to the crowd, expressing regret for her friend's actions. Izuka remarked, "That was kinda mean, Kachan." The boy merely grinned back. A tall boy with short blue hair and glasses stopped the two as they were about to enter the school building. He glared at Katsuki and said, "You there. What do you think you're doing using your quirk in public like that? And to scare well-wishing parents, it's shameful." You got something to say, fucker," snarled Katsuki. The boy, unfazed by Katsuki's rage, exclaimed, "Such language. Do you really want to be a hero? If you aren't going to respect this illustrious institution, then just go home. UA isn't a place for delinquents." Katsuki made tiny explosions in his palms as he screamed, "And who the fuck are you? Some pompous prick from an elite middle school, I bet. Fuck you, I'll be a hero and kick your ass to the bottom of the rankings." Izuka intervened swiftly between the two boys to prevent a fight from starting. Whether it was advised or not, Katsuki would likely be expelled if he assaulted an examinee prior to the exam. "Please, Kachan, no more fighting." "I'm sorry, sir, we didn't mean to cause trouble. Kachan is just really excited." "It is fine, we are all a bit on edge, but please keep yourselves under control." The taller boy gave Izuka a long look before softening his expression and offering his hand. "My name is Tenya Iida from Sume Junior High. Thank you. This is my friend, Katsuki Bakugo. Good luck on the exam today," said Izuka, grinning and shaking it. Iida grinned and bowed his head, saying, "Thank you, good luck to you as well." The boy then pivoted on his heel and strode away, forgetting all about Kachan, who had only complained about Deku's and obnoxious robot boys. Before realizing another girl was observing them, Izuka rolled her eyes at him. She had short brown hair and round cheeks, making her a cute girl. After catching Izuka's attention, the girl waved at her, and before the test began, the two of them grinned at the boy's foolishness. Present Mike was waiting to explain the exam to them in his typically raucous manner in a spacious auditorium. As Izuka sat down, the pro hero smirked at the still steaming Katsuki and gave her a subtle thumbs up. Because he was always upbeat and hosted her favorite radio show, Present Mike was one of Izuka's favorite UA teachers. The exam was fairly straightforward. In order to prevent students from the same schools from taking the same test together, the applicants were divided up among a number of different fictitious cities on the UA campus. They would have 10 minutes to destroy robots in order to accrue villain points once they arrived. The robots had the numbers 1, 2, and 3 and were worth that many points. There was also a special robot with the number 0 that was supposed to be avoided. Izuka scowled. Given that villain fights constituted a small portion of hero work, this test seemed a bit unjust to those without combat quirks. Either the exam was skewed heavily toward combat quirks, or it had a hidden goal. Izuka and Katsuki were separated for the exam because they attended the same school, but Katsuki pulled her aside before they left. He encouraged them by saying, "You better beat the rest of these scrubs. Your fire quirk is perfect for this, so don't screw around." In his own words, "I'll do my best. Be careful though, I might beat you too," Izuka teased, knowing it would infuriate Katsuki, after giving him a hug that caused him to blush and complain. Izuka was left to laugh at the boy's antics as she made her way to her own test ground after the boy, as expected, smiled maniacally at the challenge and ran off. She saw some familiar faces when she arrived, including Iida and the girl with the round cheeks. She was tempted to go say hello, but she decided to talk to her yokai in her head instead, since both of them were too busy stretching and studying for the test. "Alright, if I encounter one of those 0-pointers, I'll need the assistance of Taka and Sheikah as well as One for All." Izuka thought, "Samahata, Liob. I'm sorry, but I won't have anything for you to do." Liob responded, "I'll encourage you instead and help you find your way if you get lost." "It's okay, I don't like to fight if I can avoid it. Without water, all I can do is offer moral support as well. Samahata stated, although he appeared disappointed that he was unable to assist in the battle. I'll keep an eye out for robots and shout when I see one. My fires will be blazing. Lady Izuku, we'll be the best here. Chika smiled, looking as if she were ready to leap. Indeed, let's soar over these people. Taka continued, making airborne loops. Like when Toshinori transforms into his hero mode, One for All materialized and expanded into a much larger state, declaring, we will prevail. Plus Ultra, in the voice of All Might, he roared. Start, sounded the Present Mike's voice over the crowd. As Present Mike reprimanded some of the other competitors for anticipating a countdown in the hero world, Izuku launched herself into the air right away, using Chika's flames as a boost. Izuku quickly came across some villain bots and started analyzing them. The first pointers were simple robots with 2 Gatling guns that fired pellets slowly, the second pointers resembled 4-legged scorpions with armored legs and a gun for a stinger, and the third pointer looked like a tank with arms and 2 enormous missile pods. With her analytical mind, the green-haired girl was able to quickly identify their weaknesses and launch fireballs at them, scoring an easy 30 points in the first few minutes. However, after that, the number of robots decreased as the other applicants started to clog the space. Izuku had a respectable 52 points by the 5-minute mark, so she chose to observe for a while and observe the peculiarities of the other players. The engine-like protuberances on Ida's calves suggested that he had a super speed quirk, while the girl with the brown hair had a gravity quirk. In addition to them, she saw a strange boy with 6 webbed arms, a blonde boy with a laser beam quirk, and, wait, a pair of shoes that walked by themselves. Most likely some kind of camouflage or invisibility, though the person's incredibly sparkly shoes somewhat detracted from the effect. The girl sat on a building's roof and made notes about the strange and amazing things she observed. She only occasionally paused to shoot fireballs at a robot that was approaching or debris that was going to fall on an unwary examinee. Izuku's preference for saving people over combating robots was understandable given her desire to become a rescue hero. That is how it went until the 8-minute mark, at which point the entire place started to tremble. There's a big one coming up. After swimming back from his scouting mission, Samahata said, it is the 0-pointer, and it is enormous. Gulping, Izuku took off high enough to see it over the buildings, though she didn't need to because the enormous automaton was destroying skyscrapers like toothpicks. She turned back to the other examinees, who were frantically trying to find their way back to the entrance in the hopes of avoiding the threat, and scowled at the robot. Unfortunately, the layout of the city was confusing, and they were rapidly losing their bearings as they couldn't find their way around. Izuku flew down to the crowd and commanded, oh no, they're right in the war path of that thing. Leob, follow my lead. She yelled, everyone, follow my red flames to the entrance. As Leob, who was now in Aloade form, let himself be seen. Izuku held up the rear to make sure there were no stragglers as the examinees gratefully pursued the fireball. Then, she heard a noise that stopped her heart in its tracks. Oh wow, Izuku's face lost color as she turned around. The machine was rapidly approaching, and the gravity girl was buried beneath some debris directly in front of the 0-pointer. After repeatedly attempting to use her quirk, the girl eventually failed and started retching, most likely from overuse. Izuku blasted Chika's flames from both her palms and her feet, damaging her shoes as she flew at the girl as quickly as she could. It's okay now, I'm here to help, she said with a smile as she landed in front of her. Looking up at Izuku, the girl with the brown hair said, I can't get this off me and my quirk won't work. Izuku smiled and relaxed her body, saying, the gravity nullification quirk, right. Don't worry, I've got it. Full cowl 5%, one for all. Her body glowed with the recognizable red and green lightning as she thought this. Before carefully lifting the slab of concrete to let the girl crawl out, Izuku pumped one for all into her legs and back. She briefly considered punching the rock that was holding the trapped girl's leg, but she was afraid that the rubble would injure the victim. The girl screamed as she turned to thank Izuku. Izuku saw the 0-pointer reaching down to crush her and the girl she had saved when she looked up. There was only one choice: fight. The girl's leg was injured, so she was unable to run, and Izuku wasn't sure she could get away quickly enough if she carried her. Izuku launched herself into the air, pushing full cowl to 10%, and charged her right arm with as much of Chika's flames as she could, encircling it in a blue wreath. Full cowl 10%, plus concentrated Nekomata flames equals. Izuku threw her fist forward, hitting the zero-pointer in the head. The combination of the intense flames and the air pressure from the powerful blow produced a punch that resembled a very small, localized nuclear explosion. Regulus smash. With a loud crash, the enormous automaton fell to the ground, leaving behind nothing but molten metal and scrap that wasn't even suitable for a junkyard. The robot's head melted and crumbled under the intense heat and force, leaving it headless. Izuku flexed her fingers to make sure she was okay, finding them slightly stiff but otherwise unharmed, and grinned at her attack. Present Mike announced the end of the test, and she sighed with pleasure as she fell to the ground next to the hurt girl. Phew, heck of a test, huh? And we still have the written one next, Izuku said cheerfully as she sat on the ground next to the girl she had saved. My name is Izuku Midoriya, by the way. Yeah, thanks so much for helping me. I'm Ochako Uraraka. I'd be a pancake right now if it weren't for you, Uraraka said, followed by a nod from the other girl. The gravity girl frowned guiltily as she glanced up and down at Izuku. Izuku was barefoot because her flames had destroyed her shoes and socks, as well as the entire right arm of her jacket and the legs of her tracksuit pants, which were at least below the knee. She smiled brilliantly at Uraraka despite her profuse perspiration, adding guiltily, I'm sorry for your clothes and stuff. Aw man, those were my All Might sneakers too, Izuku moaned, slapping her head in frustration as her eyes widened and she glanced down at herself as though she was just realizing. Uraraka muttered, feeling even more guilty, I'm sorry. Izuku gave a cheeky smile and shook her head, saying, don't be sorry. You're worth more than a pair of shoes. You might even be worth 4 pairs, she added. After Uraraka laughed at the joke, Recovery Girl, Iida, and a few other examinees joined the two girls. Izuku smiled proudly as Recovery Girl glanced over her wrist and said, just a little bit of muscle strain. Relax for the rest of the day and you'll be fine. Then, she turned to Uraraka and said, you have a sprained ankle. Nothing too serious, but be careful for a few days. After giving Uraraka a healing smooch and glancing at the other examinees, Recovery Girl left. Iida followed up by saying, Miss Midoriya, I owe you thanks as well. Not only did you save the young lady when the rest of us fled, you created a flame to guide us. You have my sincere thanks, and my apologies for not trying to help. It's okay. We're all trying to be heroes, right? I just did what I thought was right. Izuku blushed as 2 of the others mimicked Iida's gratitude. The crowd eventually dispersed, and Leob made his way back to Izuku, his tail wagging with joy at being able to assist others once more. Uraraka distracted himself, so Izuku petted him. Since Izuku hadn't brought a change of clothes, Uraraka decided to leave her gym attire on and let Izuku use her civilian clothes and shoes when they woke up to the changing rooms together. Izuku gave her a heartfelt thank you and hurried off to change, partly to cover up her back scar and partly out of shyness. The two then walked to the written test together after exchanging phone numbers, Izuku's first female friend. Although the written test was challenging, Izuku found it easy because it was full of the kinds of scenarios she used to imagine for her hero notebooks. After the allotted time for the written test had passed, Izuku stretched and grinned, feeling proud that she had given it her all and, in her own modest opinion, performed admirably. Uraraka and Izuku said goodbye as they made their way to the UA gates. Call me Ochako. I hope we both get in and are in the same class. There are so many strong people applying, it'd be great to have someone I know with me. Ochako said with a happy tone. Normally shy, Izuku took in some of her contagious enthusiasm and responded with equal joy. I hope so too. I'll wash and return your clothes too, just text me your address. Ochako said, okay, see y'all later Izuku, and then she skipped off home. Izuku continued to smile broadly when Kachan eventually caught up to her. Proud of his score and irritated by his group mates, he said, so, how'd you do? The guys in my group were lame-ass posers, bragging about their flashy quirks but barely doing shit. I got 77 points from smashing those weak bots while they got nothing. After All Might compared her to a shining star when she smiled, Izuku took the habit of naming most of her moves after stars and constellations. My group had some awesome people. That Iida boy was in it, and this really nice girl named Ochako. She gave me her clothes to wear after mine got wrecked when I saved her from a zero-pointer. I even got to use my Regulus smash, she said with a smile. With a sly smile, Katsuki said, damn, wish I could have seen that. He made a concerted effort to avoid glancing at Izuku's attire. Ochako was roughly the same size as Izuku, but she had a larger bust and somewhat wider hips, but the adorable attire made the boy think unflattering things about the girl, who was essentially his sister. How many points did you get? 52. I got 30 in the first couple of minutes, but then people kept getting in the way and I didn't want to burn them, so I stepped back once I got 52. I also got to try using Leob. Had him lead the others to safety while I took on the 0-pointer. Kind of destroyed my All Might shoes though. Izuku grinned sheepishly. TCH, typical. Still, I bet you came first in your group. No one in mine got more than 20. Izuku bonded with him once more to allow him to hear her yokai, and the two found a comfortable pace as they walked home. Izuku lived farther away, but Katsuki insisted on walking her home. They all talked about the tests, comparing their responses to the written version and providing thorough accounts of the practical tests. After admitting to offering Izuku to copy answers from previous written tests, Taka received a reprimand from Katsuki. However, the Green Sparrow simply gave him a sneer, which resulted in a 5-minute delay during which Kachan attempted to make a fool of him. Only when Samahata made a shrewd remark about Taka that made the explosive boy laugh did he stop. It could be odd at times because Samahata and Kachan had such similar personalities. Katsuki gave Izuku his customary fist bump when they arrived at his apartment, saying, "I'll see you when we get the results of the exam. Call me if you go on any cool yokai hunts." Izuku bumped his fist and nodded. Her yokai then bid each other farewell. Samahata slapped his fin on Katsuki's palm, Leob bowed his head courteously, Chika rubbed against his ankle, Taka pecked his cheek, and One for All was hiding again. Izuku's mother gave her a big hug and her favorite dish, katsudon, as a welcome. Uncle Toshi had to record each one in his hero form, which was down to 2 hours a day if he was conservative, and he didn't trust himself not to tell Izuku the results. Principal Nezu was against this because he wanted her and Katsuki to experience it the same way as everyone else, even if they had recommendations. As a result, Uncle Toshi would not be returning home until after the UA results were sent out. As a result, Toshinori would be staying with Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi, his friend. Izuku settled into a rather easygoing routine for the week after the exam. She would occasionally spar with Kachan, go for walks with her yokai, and look into some of the simpler reports that Necropolis sent her. He was thrilled that she had brought Leob on board because he had such a helpful quirk. Since Ochako had to do everything by herself after moving to an apartment in Musudafu to attend UA, while her parents lived elsewhere, she had even met up with Ochako once more to return her clothes and ended up spending the day shopping with her. Although Izuku felt a little uncomfortable because she wasn't used to being around people who weren't aware of her yokai, it was pleasant and the two got along well. The fateful day finally came, and the UA letters showed up. Gran Torino and Necropolis attended the small celebration that the Bakugos threw for the Midoriyas at their house. Although Toshinori was still unable to attend, he told Izuku over the phone that they would all have more than enough of him with 2 of the letters. Mitsuki and Masaru sat on one sofa, Inko and Gran Torino on another, and the teenagers on the third as the group took up residence in the Bakugas living room. The yokai and Necropolis stood apart. Izuku went out of his way to connect with all of the adults present so they could engage with the yokai. Katsuki opened his letter first, then set the small holographic emitter on the coffee table. All Might's loud voice reverberated throughout the room as a picture of him appeared, standing in front of a garish gold backdrop and wearing a corny yellow pinstripe suit. "I am here, in hologram form. Yes, it is I, All Might, here to personally record your exam results. Katsuki Bakugo, you did very well on the written test, scoring 96%, though your answers were a little violent, but you did amazing as I thought you would. Moving on to your practical results, I have to congratulate you on a shocking 77 points. That score is the best villain point score we've had in years. Naturally you passed." Katsuki laughed proudly as the recording continued, "But there's more. We are a school of heroes. We can't just reward victory in combat, which is why we have a secret score, a rescue point score. For acts of heroism and rescue, you were awarded 30 points for a grand total of 107. The second highest score in UA history." The All Might image cut to a video of Katsuki screaming and cursing at the foolish robots that were attacking the weaker examinees before jumping to blow them up. The fact that he received the second highest score ever and the extra points left Katsuki looking stunned. Did he surpass All Might's score, then? No, All Might, who is at the top of everything else, was most likely number 1. Congratulations, young Bakugo. With a more than passing grade and your recommendation, you are more than welcome at UA. See you in the new term. All Might said, returning to his real voice instead of the hero stage voice, as he leaned in close to the camera. "Good work, my boy. I'm proud of you," he said. At that point, the hologram ceased, and everyone started congratulating Katsuki, who appeared more proud than ever. The men patted his back or ruffled his hair as Izuku, Inko, and Mitsuki gave him hugs. Meowing, tweeting, and howling their approval, the yokai even joined in the congrats. Finally letting him touch his golden fur, One for All exclaimed, "Well done, Kachan," in Izuku's voice. After that, Izuku's letter was due. The hologram got off to the same start, but All Might was more excited and couldn't control his pride for his successor and niece. Izuku blushed. She had spent a lot of time writing each response, which had taken up her time. "Izuku Midoriya, on the written exam, you scored a wonderful 97% and your answers were on par with a lot of modern hero analysts. You probably would have gotten a perfect score if you'd had time to complete your final answer. As for the all-important practical, you scored 52 villain points. A very impressive score and the average score for our top applicants. But you, who wants to be a hero that rescues others, grasped the other side of the test, even if you didn't do it consciously. Heroes do not just fight villains, they are also the beacons of hope that saved others. Let's see how you did there." As a number of clips aired, Izuku blushed as the adults and Kachan looked on in amazement at what she had done. The clips showed her casually rescuing others after she had ceased hunting robots, guiding them to safety with Leob, although it looked like she had just called forth a fireball, and then rescuing Ochako and eliminating the zero-pointer. When her daughter said, "It's okay now. I'm here to help," Inko let out a joyful cry. "For your feats of rescue, you were awarded 100 rescue points. Combined with your other score, you earned 152 points, the highest in UA history. You and another student, I bet you can guess which, were the only two to ever beat my own score of 100 total points." Izuku nearly passed out, and Kachan stared at her in astonishment. She had surpassed All Might's score. She held the record for the highest score on the UA entrance exam. Katsuki would have exploded in rage in a different world, but he was sitting next to his friend and felt nothing but joy and a tinge of jealousy. Bully Kachan and Weak Deku had grown into future great heroes, and he was proud of both of them. The recording continued with All Might leaning in, as he had done with Katsuki's video, saying, "Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya. You, will be your hero academia. You've made me so proud, Izuku. Once again, you have totally demolished my expectations. You will be a wonderful hero," he said, with a glint of proud tears in his shadowed eyes. The hologram then shut off. The Midoriya women's joyful sobs filled the room, and Kachan grinned and gave her a pat on the back. Izuku redirected some of the attention to her yokai, who she couldn't have helped without, and the yokai gladly took in some of the love and attention, although Leob wasn't used to the raucous behavior of those around Izuku, and Samahata felt he didn't do enough for praise. While the teens in question laughed and talked about their hero names, costumes, and special moves, they also celebrated the teens' outstanding scores that evening. Katsuki even attempted to persuade Izuku to spar with him using Regulus Smash, but everyone agreed that it would be a bad idea given what the move had done to the zero-pointer, so the two chose to use their quirks to create fireworks instead. The two would be starting classes at UA in a few days. Izuku was barely able to wait. In her brand new uniform, Izuku stood at the entrance to UA and gazed up at the structure in wonder. She was accompanied by her yokai and Katsuki. Although she had been training at the school since she was 9 years old, she felt more at home in the Academy of Future Heroes now that she was an official student. Her hair, which had a smile that made Izuku think of her uncle Toshi, had been left down and held out of her face with a yellow bunny clip. Katsuki exuded confidence and looked totally at home in his new uniform. Nobody could dispute that he had earned his spot here. Izuku most definitely couldn't. Both had been recommended and had nevertheless taken the entrance exams, achieving the highest scores ever recorded. Indeed, Katsuki and Izuku were deserving of their presence. Izuku was aware that Ochako, in addition to her best friend, would be present and would be in Class 1A with Kachan and Izuku. Katsuki simply shrugged when she told him, saying that as long as he wasn't with Iida, or that freaky robot bastard, as he called him, he didn't care. Iida was the first person to welcome Katsuki to their new classroom, which was unfortunate for them. "I owe you even more of an apology for my cowardice and poor judgment in the exam. You understood the true meaning of the practical test while I fled. It was a mistake on my part and one I will not repeat." Iida exclaimed as he walked up to the girl, barely pausing to bow. "Ah, Miss Midoriya, I've been waiting to speak with you." Izuku recoiled at the excitement. Iida's felt oppressive, but Ochako's was infectious. Nevertheless, she valued his sincerity. "It's okay, there's no need to apologize. Truth be told, I didn't really see any hidden meaning, I just did what I thought a hero should do. Don't worry about running away, we're still novices, so getting scared against a tough opponent is natural, right?" Iida exclaimed, "Truly, you are a great person, Miss Midoriya." As he gazed at the girl and nearly started crying. "Please, call me Izuka. Or just Midoriya if you prefer," she replied. "Ah, very well Midoriya. Please feel free to call me Iida." Not liking this boy at all, Katsuki spat, "TCH, we get it. We ain't gonna spend the day talking to some loser then ran away. Move or go die, instead." Izuka broke into her typical, "sorry for him," routine just as Iida was about to stammer back a response. Izuka finally got to see the rest of her new classmates when they were allowed to enter the classroom. In addition to Iida and Ochako, who was attempting to approach Izuka without drawing Katsuki's notice, there were the tall guy with the tentacles, the invisible person, a girl, judging by her uniform, and the laser beam boy. A girl with pink skin and horns, a boy with long greenish hair and a tongue sticking out the corner of her mouth. A boy with a tail, a boy with black lightning streaks in his blonde hair, a guy with spiky red hair, a really buff guy with big lips, a shy-looking boy with an oddly shaped head, a girl with earphone jacks for her earlobes, a boy with strange circular elbows, a boy with a bird's head, a very strange-looking short boy with hair that looked like grapes, and a serious-looking girl with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Izuka whispered to Kachan, "Whoa, we've got a pretty diverse class. I wonder what 1B looks like." He responded, "HMPH, who cares? We'll mow them all down." Izuka pouted because she didn't want to beat them. She desired to establish friendships. She cherished having Katsuki and her yokai, but as she and Ochako became friends, she realized how good it was to have other people who were also human and didn't want to blow up everything because they looked at him, or Izuka, in a way that he didn't like. Hey Izuka, Ochako exclaimed, at last taking a chance and facing Kachan's anger. Izuka introduced herself, a little perspiring despite her smile, hoping that the two would get along or that Katsuki wouldn't blow her up. "Hey Ochako, isn't it great we're finally here? I've been looking forward to his all my life. Oh, this is my friend, Katsuki Bakugo. Kachan, this is Ochako Uraraka." After a moment of staring at the round-faced girl, Katsuki slackly extended his hand and said, "Hey. You're the chick that Deku saved in the exam, right? You can't be half bad if you still got in after that fuck up." With a nervous shake of the boy's hand, Ochako said, Thanks. Deku, do you mean Izuka?" "Yeah, he gave me that nickname when we were kids to tease me. He doesn't mean anything bad by it, promise." Izuka nodded nervously. Some of her new classmates noticed, and some of them gave Katsuki a glare as though he had threatened her. In the hopes that any miscommunications could be resolved, Izuka swallowed at the glances in Katsuki's potential response. Ochako grinned and said, "Well, I think it sounds pretty cute. Deku sounds like Dekiru, which means, you can do it. You know, it's got a good vibe." Katsuki HMPHED and sat down as Izuka's face brightened. A huge yellow caterpillar suddenly popped out from behind the instructor's desk. When a shabby man dressed in plain black and covered in numerous gray scarves emerged from the caterpillar, which was actually a sleeping bag, the two girls nearly screamed in shock. "If you're all done screwing around, let's start," he grumbled. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. I'll be taking care of you all, for as long as you actually last here." Katsuki scowled and Izuka winced. This was the man All Might had urged Izuka to stay away from at all costs. Although he appeared somewhat eerie, he wasn't particularly dangerous, and since he was a pro hero who was trusted to teach at UA, he couldn't be all that horrible. Furthermore, All Might was aware of the class Izuka was entering and would have arranged for her to be moved if she was in danger. Nevertheless, that only increased the two's interest in the peculiar instructor. "Normally, I'd leave orientation and introductions until after the first test, but the principal says I can't do that anymore since I expelled my entire class that one time. Anyway, just come up to the front in order of your seats, give your name, quirk, hero ambition and any other stuff you want to share, then sit down again. The last person can wake me up when you're all done," Aizawa said, before settling into his office chair and unconscious. After giving him a puzzled look, the class decided to follow instructions without question so they could go on. First up was the boy with the naval laser, Yuga Aoyama. One word best describes his ambitions and entire personality: narcissist. Izuku's yokai started a commentary on the classmates, introductions as he did, and none of them could claim to like Aoyama. Mina Ishido, the pink girl, came next. She was described by Taka as being like cotton candy and having a really cool acid quirk. Tsuyu Asui was the green-haired girl, and her quirk was frog. Samahata was a big fan of her, and Izuku had to admit that she found the frog-like girl to have a simple charm. Iida continued by describing his engine quirk and expressing his ambition to emulate his pro-hero brother, Tensai Iida, also known as Ingenium, whom Liob admired. As Chika exclaimed about how soft her cheeks were, Ochako, who was last in line, gave a brief explanation of her anti-gravity quirk. Next up was Tailboy Mashirao Ojiro, who presented himself as a straightforward and sincere young man who, according to Liob, reminded him of an elderly martial arts master who used to reside on the outskirts of the forest he had protected in the Philippines. Then there was Denki Kaminari, who was largely dismissed by the yokai as a typical teenage boy, despite the fact that Izuku thought his peculiarity sounded great. Eijiro Kirishima, who reportedly attended the same school as Ishido, was third in that line. The always manly Samahata praised him for his ability to make his entire body hard and his desire to be a manly hero like Crimson Riot. The yokai all agreed that Koji Koda was a sweetheart, despite the strange, reserved boy only mentioning his name and his peculiarity, anima. Next up was Rikido Sato, the muscular man who seemed to enjoy baking because of his ability to turn sugar into strength. Izuku pondered whether he could match one for all if he added enough sugar. Mezzo Shoji, the tentacle boy who started the next row, had the dupli arms quirk and seemed more laid back but just as mature as Iida. Samahata cautioned Izuku to be cautious of those tentacled bastards, and likened him to an octopus. Honta Siro with the odd elbows was a fairly normal guy despite his peculiar tape quirk, while Kyoka Jiro, the girl with the earphone jacks in place of earlobes, turned out to be a laid-back girl who loved music. Izuku and her yokai were intrigued to see how Dark Shadow compared to the yokai themselves, especially since it appeared to be sentient and capable of thought and speech independent of Tokiyami himself. However, the bird man, Fumikage Tokiyami, turned out to have a quirk that had nothing to do with his appearance. Next up was Shoto Todoroki, who sat down after merely introducing his ice quirk and declaring that he would not respond to inquiries about his father. Chika remarked that ice was only half of the boy's power and that he shared a quirk with her. Given the burn on his face and the fact that Todoroki was also Endeavor's last name, who foolishly revealed his true name as a challenge to villains, it was easy to figure out why he had problems with his father. Next was Toru Hagakuri, the invisible girl, who was very animated and boisterous, which Liob assumed was a strategy to make herself stand out because it appeared that she was unable to turn off her quirk. Katsuki came next, and everything went as smoothly as it could have. "I'm Katsuki Bakugo. My quirk is explosions and I'm going to be the #1 hero. Izuku over there told me to be nice, so to stop me from exploding all your sorry asses, just follow these real easy rules. 1. Don't fuck with me or Izuku, or I'll kill you. 2. Don't call me Kachan, or I'll kill you. 3. If you call Izuku Deku, without her permission, I'll kill you. 4. Try and get in my way and I'll kill you. 5. I am the best. Say otherwise and I'll kill you." And with that, he marched back to his seat while the others sat in stunned silence. Izuku moaned, blushing from the stares she was receiving. "Kachan." With a smug grin, Kachan said, "Don't complain. At least I didn't curse." She whispered, "You cursed at least twice," but Katsuki merely sneered. He reminded her, "Ah, who cares? It's your turn." Taking a deep breath, Izuku entered the space. Hello. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I want to be a hero that helps people and that makes people feel safe. Oh, I don't mind if you call me Deku, so don't worry about it. And sorry for Kachan, he's really nice on the inside, I swear. My quirk is Tri-Flame," she said, beginning to explain her bogus ability to conceal the truth. "It lets me conjure 3 different flames, blue ones for combat, red ones to guide people and special ones that burn inside my body and kind of fuel my muscles and make me stronger. I can use the blue flames to fly too. I don't have much else to say. I'm not too interesting. Still, I hope we can all be friends." As she made her way back to her seat, her classmates cheered her on and most of them smiled affectionately at her. Being in a class where she wasn't an outsider felt so weird. She nearly missed the next person, the odd grape boy, because she was so engrossed in the warmth of this novel experience. When he mentioned how much he liked girls, Izuku became instantly uncomfortable. His name was Minoru Mineta. At least his quirk was kind of cool in a strange way, but she was suddenly acutely aware of his height and the length of her skirt. Last but not least was Momo Yaoyorozu, the ponytail girl. She was the epitome of style, possessing an amazing quirk and an air of aristocracy that was approachable. She wanted to be a hero so she could make a difference in the world and could create anything she understood the structure of. After waking Aizawa-sensei, Momo went back to her seat and smiled kindly at Izuku, causing the shorter girl to blush. Right, you all know each other. Great, change into gym clothes and meet in the PE grounds. Aizawa responded, Midoriya, stay behind a moment. Katsuki instantly growled and Izuku shivered, but Aizawa disregarded them and pushed everyone, including Katsuki, out of the classroom, leaving him and Izuku behind. The girl, feeling in trouble and anticipating a reprimand, stood tensely by the teacher's desk. Aizawa adjusted his scarves and made some characteristic goggles appear from inside them. I know about your real quirk. Your deception today was clever, and considering the situation, a wise choice. Still, I doubt you'll get through all 3 years here without telling the class the truth. Izuku recognized them right away and realized who her true teacher was. The erasure hero, Eraserhead. Izuku was frightened by the thought that he could momentarily erase the peculiarities of whoever he looked at. Izuku would actually die and not be able to return if he used his quirk while she was dying or near death. She would no longer be able to see her yokai, and she would no longer be able to communicate with them or use their gifts. They were her priceless companions. She had to keep them. In addition, she had technically passed away at least twice already. Was her peculiarity keeping her alive? Would she simply die if it were erased? Aizawa reached out a hand to the child's forehead. Relax. I can tell from your face what you're afraid of. All Might was afraid of it too. That guy must really love you, kid, 'cause he threatened to beat me up if I went near you with my quirk. What you and he don't realize is that I've been in contact with Agent Necropolis. I got called in to see if my quirk could remove the resurrection quirk of a villain on death row a long time ago. He assured me that you wouldn't drop dead, so I used my quirk on you while you were introducing yourself. Izuku looked up. What? But I could see my yokai through the whole introduction. I didn't feel anything. I figured. I don't really get how your quirk works, or how the quirks of your friends work, but it looks like I can't nullify it. But if your quirk came from Kami or whatever, then maybe that's fine. I can probably still nullify one for all though, so don't overdo it. The man grinned broadly. Without saying anything, Izuku nodded and hurried to change. Even though it didn't matter to an immortal, she swore that Aizawa had scared a few days off her lifespan because her heart was racing. Fortunately, the other girls didn't notice her change because she was the last person in the changing rooms. She then joined the other girls in the PE grounds. Are you okay? If that bastard did anything then I swear I'll kill him. Katsuki jumped to her side right away. With composure, Izuku said, It's okay, Kachan. She was close to her. Aizawa knows about my quirk. He's Eraserhead, but his quirk doesn't work on mine so I'm safe. Still not sure about my yokai quirks though, she murmured. Kirishima came over and yelled, Hey Midoriya. What did sensei want? Nothing really. Just wanting to make sure I could control my fire is all. I sort of burned my clothes during the entrance exam. She told the truth. After giving her a thorough examination, Mineta started to visualize her destroying her own clothing. Asui slapped him right away. The group was yawned by Aizawa-sensei, who arrived a moment later, saying, Okay, we're doing the quirk apprehension test now. Quirk apprehension? Inquired Ashido. Yeah, you remember those physical tests from middle school, right? In those, you were prohibited from using your quirks, but here I'll allow you to. I want to see how you use your powers to supplement your normal abilities. Bakugo, since you've been glaring at me all morning, you can be the example. Aizawa replied, leisurely tossing a soft boy. How far was your pitch in middle school? With a frown, Katsuki said, 67 meters. Pretty good. This time, I want you to use your quirk. As long as you stay in the circle, you can do whatever. Izuku watched nervously as Katsuki made his way into the pitching area's circle and got ready to throw. He screamed, Die, and let out an explosion as the ball flew out of his hand at a breakneck speed at the arc of his pitch. He still says die when he exerts himself, Izuku thought to her yokai, who were seated in the building's shade, suppressing a laugh. Some things are always the same, Taka responded with a chirp. Before revealing the screen to the others, Aizawa-sensei took a moment to examine a small device. It read 705.2 meters. Before I can train any of you, I need to know your capabilities. This test will form the basis of your hero foundation, he said. Whoa, 705 meters. Bakugo isn't messing around, the class exclaimed as they started talking excitedly. This looks like fun. We can really use our quirks. That's UA for you. Fun, you say. Are you all planning on spending your 3 years here having fun? What happened to becoming heroes? Izuku thought with a cold sweat. Alright then, in that case, the person who scores the least points in this test will be deemed hopeless, and immediately expelled. Izuku saw the expression darken in Aizawa-sensei's eye. Kaminari exclaimed, what? No way, can you do that? Aizawa grinned and said, students are pretty free in this school, but so are we teachers, and that freedom means we can dispense with you lot as we please. Welcome to the UA Hero Department. The class instantly exchanged a mixture of predatory and fearful looks. None of them had any qualms about stepping on one another if it meant continuing on their intended course, because they hadn't known one another long enough to form any attachments, and they were all focused on succeeding. Several other students appeared concerned. Mineta was small and physically weak, and Hagakure, who was fidgeting nervously, had no physical prowess beyond that of a normal person. Izuku looked to her yokai. Between them and One for All, she was fairly confident she could score in the top half and wasn't afraid of coming last. Her peculiarity wouldn't make her more athletic. Others, particularly Kachan, who flourished in this kind of dog-eat-dog competition, appeared to be quite self-assured. In our modern society of heroes and villains, the strength to face your foes, the speed to save people in time-sensitive situations, the intelligence to use your quirks safely and effectively, and the skill to immediately adapt to the reality of a harsh situation. These are what we cultivate here, but no crops grow in barren soil, and we can't afford to spend time trying to make you good enough to have a chance at being a hero. Having that chance is the prerequisite to train here. This is your first trial and your chance to prove you really deserve this opportunity, so go beyond your limits. That is the meaning of R plus Ultra, explained Aizawa. Suddenly, a class of frightened teenagers gave way to a group of young heroes who were all driven to succeed and do their best. The tests then started. The 50-meter dash was the first event, and Izuku paid close attention to how each competitor advanced by utilizing their peculiarities. Iida was the best, clearing it in 3.04 seconds thanks to his engine quirk, but the boy's expression indicated that he could have performed better if he had had more time to change gears. Ochako made her shoes and clothes weightless, which only slightly shortened her middle school time, and Asui and Ojiro used their distinct physical characteristics to accelerate their results by jumping more than dashing. Aoyama propelled himself with his laser like a rocket engine, which would have been awesome if he hadn't had to keep stopping because his stomach ached. As expected, Katsuki earned a time of 4.13 seconds by simply launching himself forward with explosions from his palms. As Izuku's turn arrived, she prepared for the test by stepping up to the starting line. Aizawa blew the starting whistle after idly observing her. With a tremendous burst of speed on the first bound, Izuku instantly cleared half the track by channeling One for All at 10% into her feet. When she was moving at her fastest, she released Sheikah's flames from her hands and used Taka's flight to lessen the effect of gravity, sending her hurtling across the finish line. 1.07 seconds was the first thing the tiny camera robot said after a few moments of waiting for her to finish. Izuku's classmates gasped as she grinned proudly. Shiro said, "Holy crap, Midoriya's actually really good." Kirishima continued, "I know right. She seemed so nervous in the introductions." With One for All, Flight, and Sheikah's fire serving as a booster, Katsuki smirked knowingly, knowing that Izuku would probably win these tests. As Aizawa-sensei recorded her score, Ochako and Iida gave her praise. She is therefore able to use One for All in a safe manner. After all, All Might must have known what he was doing, he thought. Following that, the trials went by swiftly. Shoji received the highest score in grip strength, followed by Sato and Izuku, because she was forced to rely solely on One for All and was unable to exert as much strength in her arms as her legs. The standing long jump came in third place. Izuku achieved the highest score by just flying to the other side of the sand pit, but Asui nearly caught up to her with a single jump thanks to her frog form. The fourth was the sideways jumps, in which Izuku blasted herself back and forth while using Chika's fire. Strangely enough, Mineta, who made bouncy walls out of his grape balls, won second place. Katsuki was given another chance at the softball pitch, which was the fifth and last test. He pumped his score up to 752.5 meters this time by forming the explosion to give it a more concentrated throw. However, Ochako was the big surprise winner because she made the ball weightless, causing it to float into the stratosphere and earn her an infinity score. By combining one for all with a flame boost, which she carefully shaped after witnessing Katsuki's impressive performance, Izuku placed second between Ochako and Katsuki. 810.3 meters was the outcome. Aizawa pressed a button on his small device and a results screen appeared on the wall next to the physical education building. Alright, tests are over. It's time to see your scores. Based on where they placed in each trial, each student received a point score. First place received 20, second place received 19, and so on, until 20th place received just 1. Their final rankings were then determined by adding up all of the points. Izuku had equaled 96 points by placing first in the dash, third in the grip test, first in the jump, second in the sideways jumps, and second in the pitch. The scoreboard caught her attention. 1. The Midoriya. 2. Yaoyorozu. 3. Bakugo. 4. Todoroki. 5. Ida. 6. Tokiyami. 7. Shoji. 8. The Ojiro. 9. Kirishima. 10. Ashido. 11. The Uraraka. 12. The Koda. 13. Sato. 14. Asui. 15. Aoyama. 16. Shiro. 17. The Kaminari. 18. Jiro. 19. Hagakure. 20. Mineta. Izuku found it hard to believe. She would be the first. No way, at least until they all appeared to recall their teacher's warning that the last place finisher would be expelled. Everyone else was either rejoicing or lamenting their scores. The teens turned to face Mineta, who was trembling and appeared to be about to cry. Aizawa appeared to notice and simply gave them all a languid glance. Oh yeah, the expulsion thing was a lie. What? Yeah, I made it up to draw out the upper limit of your quirks. Mineta, you did badly, but so long as your chances aren't zero, I'll let you stay. Everyone go change and go to the classroom. I've got to do some actual orientation stuff with you before I send you home. The individual replied as he returned to his schoolroom. Izuku accompanied the girls back to their changing area, where she silently listened to the other girls' conversations as they interacted and got to know one another. At times, Ashido or Ochako would ask her questions. Midoriya, if you don't mind me asking, why are you timid when you're crazy powerful? Jiro responded. Izuku shook her head in disbelief. I don't know really, I'm just a bit shy I suppose. Before I met Ochako at the entrance exams, Kachan was my only friend, so I really don't know how to act when people my age want to talk to me. Ah, that's so cute. Ashido clung to the girl, who was still waiting for the others to depart and hadn't started getting dressed, and said, I want to be your friend. You just let big sis Mina take care of you. Izuku blushed brightly as the girl with the pink skin, who seemed to have no problem hugging her while wearing only her underwear, embarrassed her greatly. We should all be friends, said Hagakure. The boys have us outnumbered almost 2-1. We've got to stick together. You can all call me Toru. Additionally, the frog girl added, I agree. Call me Suyu. Why not? I'm not a girly girl, but if you're cool with me then I'm cool with you. Kyoka responded. I'm in too. Call me Ochako. Yeah, and I'm Mina. I can be your big sis. After some hesitation, Yaoyorozu said, I guess it would be appropriate since we are classmates. Okay. You can all call me Momo. Mina was beaming with delight. This is great. We can be like a little family. Momo's the mom, I'm the fun sister, Kyoka's the cool one, Suyu's the funny one, Toru's the perky one, Ochako is the cutesy one, and Izuku is the baby that we all look out for. They all laughed as Kyoka growled, yeah, a baby that could kick our asses, together. By the way Izuku, how come you're not changing? We're all girls here, or are you shy about your body? Izuku blushed and said, well what the heck, you'll find out eventually anyway. Before turning around and revealing her back to the others, Izuku removed her shirt and jacket. Toru let out a sound akin to a puppy's whimper as they all gasped. Oh my god Izuku, what happened? Ochako exclaimed, staring at the enormous burn scar that her bra strap only partially covered. An incident when I was 9. An explosion burnt up most of my back. Izuku admitted, I hid it from everyone in my old school because I thought it was ugly and thought people would tease me. What kind of despicable person would tease you for that? The girls at your old school must have been very shallow. Momo growled. Izuku surmised that Momo detested shallow people because she was frequently portrayed as a pampered, wealthy girl. She was a little pleased to see the most stoic of the girls reacting with such fervor. You said it was an incident, and caused by an explosion. Does it have anything to do with Bakugo? Suyu straightened a little and had a strange expression on her face. With a look that alternated between incredulity and rage, Ashido said, Hey, yeah. We've seen how possessive he is of you and he definitely seems the type. Did he do this to you? I mean, he definitely isn't the cause of this. It was his quirk that did it, but he wasn't the one using it, Izuku screamed, then recoiled. According to Kyoka, what do you mean? The green-haired girl sighed as she described what had happened with Jack of Hearts, a name that only Momo knew, how it had caused her to be injured, and how her quirk, technically true, but the girls believed Izuku meant her fake, tri-flame, quirk rather than her real one, had manifested. Kyoka looked impressed and remarked, Wow, it's pretty amazing that you took down a villain at 9 years old. Izuku shrugged and said, Well, I just hurt him. All Might actually beat him and saved us. With a sorrowful expression in her eyes, Ochako remarked, Even so, that must have been a really frightening experience. That burn must have hurt so much. Izuku's burn was no longer visible because they had all changed by now, but Ochako could still vividly picture it in her mind. It was really painful, but to be honest, I think the whole thing hurt Kachan more than me. No matter how often I told him it wasn't his fault, he never believes me. He thinks I don't notice, but I know that whenever I turn my back, he stares at it with this pained look on his face. He feels so guilty that he even made room in his dream of being number 1 for me, saying we'd be number 1 as a team. The child sighed as she poked her fingers together. Suyu cocked her head and said, I should probably apologize. Maybe I misjudged him. Izuku nodded. Trust me, he won't care. I don't mean to be rude, but he won't care at all about what anyone says until they prove they're worth listening to, and I don't think anyone in class has done that yet. Suyu gave a wink. Okay, then I'll wait until he'll listen. We should head back before Aizawa-sensei gets mad. All of the girls nodded off to class. As the pupils were evolving. In Class 1A, Shota Aizawa sat behind his desk, contemplating the recently concluded test while he waited for his students to return. Despite a few less than ideal personalities, he had to admit that this class had a lot of potential. Bakugo was too violent and aggressive, and Mineta and Aoyama had the exact opposite attitude for hero work. They were preoccupied with getting girls and looking cool. Aizawa questioned whether the boy's desire to become a hero was motivated by a genuine desire to aid others or by the desire to be able to fight legally. Conversely, there were those with a much softer side, like Uraraka and Midoriya, who had the right mindset of wanting to assist others but appeared to be the kind to back down if they had to engage in combat with real people. According to what Agent Necropolis and Nezu had told him, Midoriya had previously thought of a villain and a number of hostile yokai, but in the former case, it was a survival instinct, and in the latter case, it had negatively impacted her mental state. Then came Todoroki and Yaoyorozu, the other 2 recommended students. Given that they come from well-known and affluent families, both took things very seriously and maintained a largely stoic facade around the other students. However, Aizawa was concerned that others might perceive that they were acting. When his classmates found out that Todoroki was coasting through the course with only half of his power while everyone else was giving it their all, Aizawa was afraid of how they would react. Todoroki was the worst case. When a wilted man wearing a bright yellow suit walked into the classroom with a somber expression on his face, Aizawa was startled out of his reverie. The weary man said, All Might. I wondered when you'd show up, but I figured it would be after school. I needed to talk to you about young Midoriya. Don't bother. Aizawa replied, Necropolis gave me the clear that my quirk wouldn't be harmful to her. I tested it and as we thought, she didn't just drop dead. Toshinori's fists clenched. Izuku must have been terrified. She had spent 6 years living with her yokai. Stop pulling that face. Aizawa reprimanded. My quirk didn't even work on her. She could still see her yokai while I was erasing her quirk. If they simply vanished on her. All Might twitched. Really? So her quirk cannot be erased. Doesn't look like it. I used it again while she was using one of her yokai to fly in the long jump, but it didn't work then either. It seems I can only erase one for all, which means that her resurrection quirk may not have any kind of link to her actual body. All her powers come from her spirit, so are unlikely to be managed by a quirk factor, which I can erase. Only your own quirk has become part of her DNA and can be erased, the underground hero explained. That's an immense relief. I'm sorry for my harsh words before about you staying away from her. I was afraid she'd be hurt, All Might said, letting out a sigh and pressing his hand to his heart. Forget it. I did what you asked because I was worried too. I didn't want this little girl's life on my hands just because I was curious. Now, perhaps you can help me. Aizawa described his thoughts about each student and his worries about possible personality conflicts and their attitudes. Though he appeared somewhat perplexed, All Might listened carefully and said, "Why tell me this? I'm happy to advise, but you're the better teacher. Because I work independently most of the time and I feel that a teamwork approach may be able to help them," explained Aizawa. "So you're thinking of having them group up, like a buddy system?" asked Toshinori, nodding. "Yes. I'm hoping to group them together in a way that their buddy can help them make up for their flaws." "Okay, I think I can help. Let's partner them up like this," the blonde man said, tapping his finger against his chin in contemplation. He then took a piece of paper and started writing the students' names in pairs according to how he thought they could relate to and make up for each other's shortcomings. When he finished, Aizawa raised an eyebrow at it. "You didn't put Midoriya and Bakugo together like I thought you would," he said. "Those two have been together for so long that any impact they could have on each other has long been had. The two rely on one another too much. Young Midoriya relies on young Bakugo to give her strength and confidence, while he relies on her to keep him from going too far so he doesn't trust his own judgment. Izuku needs to gain confidence for herself and Katsuki needs to learn how to make the right decision without help." All Might clarified, even though he appeared guilty about the amount of boasting he did when the two outperformed him on the entrance exam. Aizawa was merely impressed that All Might could see the shortcomings in his two favorite children. Aizawa pushed All Might away, saying, "Good advice. Now you better go, the students will be back in a moment." Grinning, Toshinori walked out of the room. The boys returned first, then the girls a short while later, and finally Aoyama. Aizawa kept a close eye on each of them, observing that the girls were constantly glancing at Midoriya in particular. Yaoyorozu appeared to be making a concerted effort to avoid looking at the girl's back. Maybe they connected over some conversation in the locker room. As he stood up straight, he thought. "Right, now that you're all back, I've got some orientation stuff to hand out. These are your class schedules. You'll have standard classes every morning and hero-focused classes in the afternoon. Mondays and Wednesdays will be rescue-focused training. Tuesdays and Thursdays will be villain and crime-focused training. Fridays will be general hero studies. We have additional elective courses that take the place of normal school clubs, focused on detective work, healing, stealth, technology and vehicle operation. You'll learn aspects of these through your normal lessons too, but these are for those who want extra help or more specialized training." Aizawa continued, handing out stacks of paperwork to front row. As she handed them back to Mineta, Izuku read them rapidly, being careful not to hold her paper too close to her face so her yokai could read it. "Healing seems like a sensible choice for you. However, I'm assuming it's more first aid than true healing," Sheikah said. "I had the same thought. For a rescue hero, it's an essential skill," Izuku thought. Following the distribution of all the papers, Aizawa briefly reviewed the school's rules, mostly standard fare with a few extra security-focused rules before moving on to the section he was most eager to discuss. "Right, this year, I'm trying something different. In past years, getting my students to work together and practice teamwork has been a nightmare, so this time, I'm going to be assigning you all into two-person teams. These will be your assigned teams for any lessons that use them, though there will be times you'll be placed in random teams or given the choice to team up with whoever you want. Your assigned partner will also be the person you work with on story assignments, and if one of you joins a club, the other will have to as well. With the exception of bathroom breaks or the changing rooms, you're expected to stay with your partner at all times during the school day. If you have any issues with your partner, then come talk to me." The class began to complain, and Katsuki turned slightly to face Izuku. This was going to get really noisy if he wasn't paired with Izuku, so the green-haired girl and many of her new female friends felt a sudden wave of dread. One of the first teams Aizawa chose was, "Your teams are as follows, Mineta and Ojiro." Ojiro's martial arts expertise and serious demeanor would be able to support Mineta, who lacked any discipline or practical combat skills. Aizawa acknowledged that the team was more focused on making Mineta less annoying, but Ojiro lacked the inventiveness that Mineta appeared to exhibit with his quirk. Mineta complained that he wasn't paired with a girl, and Ojiro appeared a little upset about his partner. Hagakure and Kota. This one was simple. Hagakure was easy to miss but boisterous and gregarious, while Kota was very different in appearance but so reserved that he hardly spoke. While Hagakure would probably calm down a little to help Kota feel more at ease, working with the invisible girl would hopefully help Kota come out of his shell. Although it was difficult to predict their reactions, neither appeared to be upset. Jiro and Kaminari. Aizawa found it impossible to overlook the possible fusion of their peculiarities. He didn't have much more logic than that. The team just seemed right, and he was more focused on matching the others appropriately because neither of them had any significant character defects. Kaminari, still mentally fried from the apprehension test, simply drooled and said, "Yay," while Jiro appeared frustrated. Shiro and Sato. This team was created merely because, after Aizawa had assigned everyone else, they were the only two remaining. Shiro simply grinned, and Sato dutifully nodded. Aoyama and Tokiyami. Tokiyami thudded his head against his desk, and there was a sigh. He was not going to have an easy time with this. While Tokiyami forced Aoyama to take the course more seriously and, ideally, lessen his narcissism, Aizawa hoped that Aoyama's extreme shininess would help Tokiyami relax a little. Aoyama appeared to be completely unaffected by the news. Aizawa prepared himself for the inevitable by going down to the next team on the list, Asui and Bakugo. Why am I paired with Frog Girl? Wasn't I the top boy in the class? Then I should be paired with the top girl, which is Izuku. The boy yelled, leaping to his feet so quickly that his seat fell backward. Aizawa was massaging his temples. This has nothing to do with your rankings in the apprehension test. Your teams are based on personality and quirk synergy. Tsuyu Asui is a serious student and not afraid to say whatever is on her mind, so she's probably the only person in the class one can assign to you, since most of the others would be intimidated or react violently to your aggression. Now sit down before I kick you out. Bakugo snarled but complied because he didn't want to be kicked out. In contrast to his childhood, his temper was more like the explosions he produced, huge, loud, and damaging, but they passed quickly. Everyone released a breath they were unaware they were holding as soon as Bakugo said, "Down." To her credit, Tsuyu just croaked with a neutral expression, showing no signs of bother. Izuku mentally noted that she should speak with Katsuki and advise him to treat the frog girl, who had recently become her friend, with kindness. Aizawa interpreted the two smiling at each other as a positive sign. Moving on. The next team is Uraraka and Iida. Rescue missions would benefit greatly from the synergy between their peculiarities, as Iida's speed could compensate for Uraraka's anti-gravity's time limit. Iida was a good fit for Uraraka because he was serious enough about being a hero that he wasn't focused on villains or rescue, and he was working toward becoming a balanced hero like his brother. He would support Uraraka on her path toward rescue while also encouraging her to be able to handle combat situations. Hopefully, Uraraka would also assist in removing the stick from Iida's ass. Ashido and Shoji. The two were accustomed to being gawked at because they were the most unusual-looking students in the class, which helped them bond. Additionally, their personalities were different. Shoji was conservative and could assist Ashido by soothing her a little, while Ashido was over the top and could make Shoji seem more approachable, which would be crucial as a pro-hero. Despite these factors, Aizawa had run out of people to pair up, so this was another team that was created. Kirishima and Yaoyorozu. A straightforward team, Kirishima focused mostly on offense and defense, taking or delivering hard blows, which was useful for combat heroes but not much else. However, Yaoyorozu was incredibly adaptable and intelligent enough to lead Kirishima. He could learn how to use his quirk more effectively or how to use intelligence in battle, while she could learn combat proficiency. And lastly, Todoroki and Midoriya. This was a bit of a risk on Aizawa's part because, despite the fact that the elements were opposite, their peculiarities, or at least the ones that their classmates knew, were strikingly similar. The two had very different needs. Todoroki needed to learn some people skills and teamwork, while Midoriya needed to gain confidence. Aizawa had a slight fear that Todoroki would simply ignore Midoriya and that she would lack the courage to confront him. She appeared to be the kind of girl who would quickly defeat villains and catastrophes while completely collapsing in the face of pure conflict. Izuku turned to face the boy with the two colors, nodding as they locked eyes. Todoroki gave a nod in return, but said nothing else. Even when he was taking the test, his face had hardly changed since the introductions. Taka remarked, "This guy is an ice man." Katsuki turned to face Todoroki as well, his scowl threatening to use violence if the icy teen caused Izuku any harm. Todoroki didn't even give him a glance. Aizawa breathed a sigh of relief and out. "Right, my job is done. As a homework assignment for tomorrow, you're all to spend an hour with your new partner getting to know them. What you do in that hour doesn't matter so long as you don't hurt anyone, and yes Bakugo, that includes your partner." Katsuki narrowed his eyes at the teacher and slowly lowered the hand he had been raising. As Aizawa left the classroom and everyone went to their partners to arrange times to meet and chat, Izuku stifled a laugh. With a bored expression on his face, Todoroki went up to Izuku first. Without giving Izuku a chance to respond, he left after saying, "Meet me at the PE grounds." Something told Izuku that this hour would not be pleasant, so she swallowed. Fearing what Todoroki would say, Izuku walked slowly to the PE grounds. He only wanted to get Aizawa's assignment over with, according to her rational side, but there was something strange about him. Although the boy never mentioned it, Chika claimed that he possessed both fire and ice. Izuku was aware that he was the son of Endeavor, the number 2 hero but a controversial character. A few years prior to the emergence of her quirk, Izuku vaguely recalled a scandal involving the man, but she was unable to recall it. Izuku rarely remembered scandals, especially those involving heroes she didn't particularly like. However, there was still another issue with the whole thing. Even after accounting for his ice, there was something about Todoroki that felt abnormally cold. On a few occasions, she thought she might catch glimpses of distant white flashes whenever Todoroki was present, but they would always disappear before she could catch a glimpse. Todoroki's pessimism might have drawn some kind of yokai. In any case, Todoroki was now her partner, and Izuku would make sure to watch him and try to assist him. She wanted to have Kachan's social confidence, as she had gone out with Tsuyu for their own team-building activity. Izuku turned the corner to the PE grounds and saw Todoroki leaning against the wall, completely at ease and maintaining his eternally icy expression. The boy's eyes appeared softer than usual as they gazed off into space, and Izuku swore she saw a white aura of some sort enveloping him. Todoroki, I'm here," Izuku made a quiet voice. As he turned to face her, the aura dissipated and the boy's eyes became as hard as ever. Todoroki watched Izuku walk over to stand next to him and said, "Good. We need to spend an hour together and I don't want to waste time. I've got some things I wanted to ask you." Izuku tried to sound confident as she said, "Well, I'll answer what I can. If we're going to be a team, we should get along." Then I'll cut to the chase. Are you All Might's illegitimate child? Izuku blinked. Todoroki was totally serious, but for a split second she thought he was kidding and would burst out laughing at her confused look. Trying to maintain her composure, she said, "No. Why would you even ask that? One for All was meant to remain a secret after all, and if Todoroki noticed the parallels between her power and All Might's, that might be in danger. I have multiple reasons. The way you move when you use your quirk to augment your power is just like All Might. Also, my father told me that All Might gave his recommendation to a female student that took the entrance exam anyway and beat All Might's score. I checked the records and Izuku Midoriya was named the top student in the exam. I put 2 and 2 together from there," he said, raising his arms. "Now again, are you All Might's child?" Izuku let out a sigh. Why would Endeavor share the suggestion with his son? Only because she had inquired when Nezu gave Kachan his own recommendation did Izuku know about Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. "What I said was the truth. All Might isn't my father, nor are we blood relatives." As if to determine whether she was telling the truth, Todoroki gazed at her for a minute. After a while, he shrugged, content that she was telling the truth. "So no blood relation, but you are his student or apprentice, right?" Izuku felt a little bad because this was the second time she had had to lie today. "Why yeah, he took an interest in me after an incident with a villain when I was 9 and began training me. My quirk can augment my strength in a similar way to All Might, so he thought I'd be a good apprentice. Even though it was necessary, it still bothered her. Why do you want to know? Are you an All Might fan?" Todoroki sighed. "Not exactly. I hate to say it, but I think this partnership will be a bad idea. If you're All Might's successor, then my father will be expecting me to crush and surpass you. For once, my opinion aligns with his." I need to surpass you in raw fighting ability. I think I am superior. If you're going to make declarations like that, then you better tell me why." Izuku was half yelling. Todoroki and she were both meant to be heroes. They ought to be above this small-minded nonsense. The boy with the two colors looked at her with a look of surprise in his eyes because he didn't think Izuku would really challenge him. Strangely, he appeared to be happy. "That is, a fair request. What do you know of quirk marriages?" Izuku's face turned pale and her heart nearly stopped. After feeling ill, she managed to formulate a sour response while glancing at Todoroki. "I doubt you'll find anyone in the class who knows as much about them as I do." "I see. You're the product of one too," the boy said with a deep scowl. Izuku nodded. "My birth father is the second son of some big-shot quirk supply company CEO. They're one of the companies heading quirk research and building solutions for people whose quirks cause them issues in their daily life. As the second son, the only way my father could become CEO was to bring something to the company that outstripped his older brother. He thought it would be a good idea to bring a child with a powerful quirk. His own quirk was evolution, an ability that supposedly let him adapt to small changes in his environment. He thought that if he married a woman with a psychic-type quirk like my mother's telekinesis, he could create a child with an evolving psychic quirk which would beat his brother. Didn't work out for him." Izuku spat the last bit with more venom than anyone would think she was capable of. Todoroki scowled. He needed to know what happened, but knew he shouldn't press her. Izuku scowled and said, "I happened." Izuku started crying, and Todoroki felt a sudden wave of regret. He shouldn't have asked. He should have just kept this to himself and made idle small talk for an hour. "I was seemingly quirkless. I had the extra toe joint and I didn't manifest a quirk until I turned 9. On my 4th birthday, he demanded we go to the hospital to check if something was wrong. When he learned that I was quirkless, or at least seemed to be, he abandoned us." Izuku got herself under control by slapping her cheeks and yelling in exasperation. "Sorry about that. I don't like telling that story. I can guess from what you said that you came from a quirk marriage too, so you don't need to tell me." Todoroki nodded his head. "No, I made you tell me, it's only right I do the same. Like you, my father sought my mother and her quirk to create a child that could help him rise from being the second best. Though instead of becoming a CEO, he wanted to become the #1 hero. He created me with the sole purpose of surpassing All Might and becoming #1 hero, because he was never strong enough to do it himself. But my father is a monster in more ways than that. He abused me under the pretense of training and hit my mother when she tried to protect me." With hesitation, Izuku put her hand up to his scarred eye and asked, "Did he do this?" Todoroki sighed. "No, but he was the reason it happened. His abuse caused my mother to snap and she poured boiling water over my left side, since she mistook me for my father in a fit of fear. My father had her put in a mental hospital and I never got to see her again." Izuku was about to question why he had never paid her a visit when she suddenly felt terrible. She appeared to be gazing through Todoroki at the white veil that had descended behind him. The boy had no idea who was behind him, but his expression changed from one of sadness to one of concern as Izuku's eyes started to well up with 2 heavy streams of tears. Behind her, Izuku could hear her yokai howling in grief or muttering incredulously. Izuku threw herself at Todoroki and gave him a tight hug, unsure of what else to do. Unaware of what Izuku had witnessed, Todoroki simply stood there clumsily and gave her a back pat. The hug would have been nice if she hadn't been crying, he had to admit. Unfortunately, as Izuku held Todoroki and stared at the figure behind him, all she could feel was her heart breaking in two. A woman with snow-white skin was wearing a long kimono with a white veil. Her eyes matched Todoroki's right eye, and she had long, white hair. The woman, a Yukiana, a yokai, made eye contact with Izuku and gazed at him in astonishment. As she watched this girl console her son, Todoroki's mother silently sobbed. With her voice cracking so much that she could hardly speak, Izuku whispered, "I'm so sorry, Todoroki. I'm so sorry." Todoroki said softly, "You know, don't you, that my mother took her own life?" The girl nodded against his shoulder, but he didn't hear her respond. He exhaled. "I made the same girl cry twice in the space of 20 minutes, this partnership is already a mess." Instead of responding, Izuku watched as Chika went up to the Yukiana and whispered something to the yokai, probably informing her of Izuku's talent and requesting that they speak later. To the relief of Todoroki, who was growing anxious from the extended contact, Izuku finally withdrew from him. "We're partners now," Maybe you'll beat me and become #1 hero, and maybe you won't, but that's not important now. If possible, I want us to be friends. You can call me Izuku if you like. Look, if this is out of sympathy or because of my dad, Todoroki sighed. No, Izuku replied, I want to be your friend because I think you're a good person. I admit that I feel sad about your mother, but that's not why I want to be your friend. And as for your dad, Endeavor he can go frick himself. Frick, snorted Todoroki. With a flush and twitchy fingers, Izuku said, I don't like to curse. The dam was broken in an instant. Todoroki laughed aloud, his cheeks starting to hurt from the smile, and all the intense tension and feelings from the previous conversation drained away. Izuku pouted a little because he was making fun of her, but she soon started laughing as well. Before her eyes filled with tears of joy, the Yukiana appeared perplexed by her son's laughter. The yokai mouthed, thank you, to Izuku after making eye contact with her once more. Izuku grinned and nodded. Both of them were sitting on the ground, catching their breath, by the time they had both calmed down. You really are like All Might, Todoroki responded, going around with a smile and spreading it to others. I haven't laughed like that since before I got this scar. Thank you, Mido. No, thank you Izuku. With a smile, the girl said, no problem, Shoto. The two teenagers sat together for more than the hour that Aizawa-sensei had recommended. They talked a little about their fathers but talked a lot about their mothers. Shoto was beaming as he recalled his mother, who Izuku found out was named Kori by her parents because it was obvious from birth that she had inherited her mother's ice powers. They then discussed interests, other family members, and friends. It turned out that this was another area where Shoto and Izuku shared similarities, as both had only one friend prior to attending UA, Izuku's Kachan, and Shoto's sister Fuyumi. As a final insult to the man, Izuku also discovered that Shoto had in fact inherited Endeavor's quirk along with his mother's, but he had refused to use it following the events involving his mother. He wanted to reject everything his father had built and become the greatest hero without his quirk. Izuku wanted to argue, but it was getting late, and if she didn't get home soon, her mother and Kachan would be worried. She also needed to speak with Kori Todoroki's yokai. So, after saying goodbye politely and receiving a more muted response from Shoto, Izuku doubled back into UA and made her way to the gardens along the school's western wall. As she had promised Chika, she discovered the well-known Yukiana waiting for her. Izuku bowed courteously and said, Mrs. Todoroki, it's nice to meet you, though I wish it wasn't like this. She was surrounded by her yokai, as they were always when confronted by a strange spirit. One for All had come out of hiding and was keeping a close eye on things. In a quiet voice that practically oozed remorse, the Yukiana said, Please, call me Kori. I do not wish to bear that man's name. Okay, in that case, call me Izuku. I want to help you to move on to the next life. Izuku replied gently. Kori replied, I know. Please don't take offense, but there is no way I will move on as things are now. I need to watch over my Shoto. He can't see or hear me, but I think he can feel me sometimes. He needs someone to give him some kind of love. Dear Fuyumi tries her best, but she can't overcome that monster's influence on her own. Chika purred, her connection to this world is the mother's regret type. It isn't the kind that will be dispersed with pretty words or any amount of convincing. We must either ease her regret or destroy her. I won't hurt her. Endeavor has done more than enough of that, and I could never face Shoto again if I did too. Izuku shouted. Izuku's nose was gently touched by the Nekomata, who said, I was just stating the facts, and I did not expect you to. Oh, sorry Chika, I got the wrong idea. With a slight smile, Kori observed the exchange and said, your hero is quite a passionate one. I am happy that Shoto has someone who cares for him so much after only one conversation. Leob replied, our cub has more love than she knows what to do with. Stop it guys, you're embarrassing me, Izuku gently objected. Kori, can you tell us more about your regrets? We know we can't just talk them away, but if we know more, we might be able to help you. You are aware of what happened between myself and Shoto. The last time I saw him, I became overcome with madness and mistook him for his father. I threw scalding water on his face and burned him. I didn't mean to hurt him, but that doesn't change that I did. That bastard had me committed after that, and I never saw Shoto again until I died, but I saw Endeavor again. The Yukiana said, glancing at the girl for a few moments before nodding. He came to my hospital room, ranting and raving that because of me, Shoto was refusing to use his fire quirk and was rejecting Endeavor completely. To punish me for what he saw as my fault, he said I would be sent to another hospital in America and have my parental rights removed and a restraining order put up between myself and my son. Izuku's expression darkened as she said, "So you took your own life?" Smiled. It seemed the only way I'd ever have a chance to see my son again. I prayed I'd be able to watch over him, and now I can. I wish I could have used another way, but Endeavor had power and connections I could never overcome. I watch over my son now, just as I wanted, but it hurts so much to see my son rejecting himself. My foolish mistake of mistaking him for his father has made him think of half of himself as evil. Izuku said, her eyes ablaze with shock and sorrow. That's why he's so determined not to use his fire side. It's not just to spite Endeavor, it's because he hates it and sees himself as half Endeavor. He hates and rejects half of his existence. Sheikah nodded her head. This is dangerous. A person with that much negative emotions will attract dangerous yokai, and if he dies with those feelings, he'll almost certainly become a malevolent yokai, or worse, a demon. Both Kori and Izuku's eyes widened as they gazed at the spirit. Early on, Izuku discovered that demons were virtually unstoppable, irredeemable spirits with a vast array of negative emotions. They typically formed in horrifically painful environments, such as massacres and battlefields. They had no mind, only an unquenchable appetite for souls, so they could not be reasoned with. Earthquakes trembled with their every step, hurricanes materialized with every breath, and their mere presence raised the local rates of murder and suicide. The strongest of the benevolent spirits was tasked with destroying them in order to get rid of them. There were 7 strong archdemons that couldn't be destroyed. Instead, they were firmly imprisoned in each of the 7 continents of the world, with the exception of lesser demons, which were swiftly destroyed. Well, I wanted to help Shoto anyway, but since helping him also helps his mom, I have double the motivation. Izuku said. Kori grinned. You are kind. I'm glad my son made such a friend. I leave him in your hands, since I cannot do much myself. I also wish you luck with your own father. Izuku gave a nod. I'll take care of Shoto. Don't worry about my dad. I never really loved him, so it's no great loss that he left. Besides, I have a pretty amazing uncle to take his place. Kori laughed and took off, hoping to see Shoto once more. Izuku watched her go. She had previously encountered many people who believed that suicide was a cowardly act, but meeting Kori undoubtedly strengthened that view. Shoto had been harmed by Kori's hasty and agonizing choice, but she had done it to be by his side. It must have taken courage to watch the man you detested the most harm your beloved son all the time while you were helpless to stop it. Lesser souls would have run away to avoid the agony of witnessing such a thing. Izuku walked home thinking about their conversation, discussing with her yokai how to help Shoto accept every aspect of himself, including the traits he inherited from his father. By Suyu and Katsuki, Todoroki had gone up to Izuku and essentially insisted that she meet him at the PE grounds, which Katsuki had observed with annoyance. Just as the explosive boy was about to call him out, Izuku got up and walked out of the room to meet the half-boy. She said goodbye to everyone politely and without complaining. Katsuki would have pursued her, but Asui, the frog girl, greeted him at the door. With irritation, he said, "Huh, what do you want?" Unfazed by the spiky blonde, Asui croaked. "Aizawa-sensei's assignment. We should get it over with." Asui just blinked at Katsuki, who growled in frustration. "TCH, at least you have a damn backbone. Come on, we'll use the boys' locker room." "Isn't that inappropriate?" Asui asked, her cheeks blushing slightly. "It's private. If I have to spend an hour talking a bunch of mushy shit with you, I'd rather it not be around witnesses, and I figure you'd prefer it to me going into the girls' locker room," replied the boy. Following Katsuki to the locker room, Asui uttered only the words, "That makes sense, I suppose." Once inside, Katsuki glared at the frog girl while lounging on one of the benches and crossing his arms. He insisted, "You go first." Asui took a seat of her own and said, "All right." She seemed uninterested in the room and focused entirely on him, Katsuki observed. He found it unsettling that she never took her eyes off of his. This girl was quite content to keep eye contact with him even though no one, not even Izuku or his mother, would look him in the eyes for longer than absolutely necessary. "I wanted to start with an apology. I'm sorry, I misjudged you as a possible abuser and jumped to conclusions upon seeing Izuku's scar. She told me the truth, so now I know that I was wrong. I apologize." She showed you that?" Katsuki asked, her eyes widening. Izuku never showed her back to anyone. She had always changed for gym in a restroom stall during middle school, and she had never shown her mother. He said, "It was unavoidable since we have no stalls in the changing rooms." Katsuki gasped. "Damn it, if any of you insult her for it, I'll beat the shit out of you. I don't care if you're a girl." Asui remained calm but slightly raised her voice, saying, "We would never do that. Izuku told us about Jack of Hearts and how he used your quirk to hurt her. We know the truth and won't insult her. Heroes often get scars from battle, right? Good, make sure you don't. That fucking scar is seared into my fucking brain just as much as it is to Izuku's back." Katsuki barked. He looked sheepish all of a sudden and said, "Don't tell Izuku I cursed. She doesn't like it and will pout." Asui laughed. "When we first saw you, most of the class thought you were a bully controlling Izuku, but it looks like it's her that has you under control. It's rather cute." "Huh, wanna say that again?" blushed Katsuki. Straight-faced, Asui declared, "It's cute. TCH, you're lucky that Izuku likes you. So, do you accept my apology?" Asui asked, giggling once more and making a sound akin to a croaking frog. "Huh, oh, yeah whatever, I don't really care what you or the rest of the class think of me. You know, Izuku said the same thing. She said you wouldn't care what we thought until we proved ourselves worthy in your eyes. She knows a lot about you, though that's no surprise since you've been going on romantic trips to the woods since you were 9. Asui laughed. With a bewildered expression on his face, Katsuki asked, "Alone? Izuku told you we were alone when Jack of Hearts attacked?" Blinking, Asui said, "Well, yes, she did." The kid growled. "We weren't fucking alone. There were lots of us, all other boys. Izuku was a late bloomer, so we all teased her for being quirkless. It was bullying, alright. But when that bastard attacked us, all my friends with all their amazing quirks ran away and ditched me. They didn't even go for help. Only Izuku, whom I picked on and called useless, stayed to protect me with no quirk. She saved my ass, and if it weren't for her quirk, she'd have been killed by my own power." "Izuku's quirk saved her?" asked Asui, raising an eyebrow. After revealing too much, Katsuki almost lost his cool and said, "Yeah. Her fire quirk makes her partially fireproof. It was weaker back then though. These days she won't get hurt by fire and heat at all." The frog girl said, "It's quite amazing. I admire Izuku. She's shy and kind, but also very strong. I think she'll be a great hero." It appeared that she accepted that and went on. Katsuki gave a nod. "Of course she will be. And I'll be standing at the top as her partner. Though I get top billing." We agreed on that. The shy girl was briefly respected by both of them. With a sigh, Katsuki turned to face the frog girl. Whether he liked it or not, he had to get to know her better because she was now Izuku's friend and partner. "Look, if you don't talk shit about me or Izuku, then we're cool." Suyu grinned and croaked, "That's fair. Tell me about yourself. You can also call me Suyu." Katsuki sighed, "I don't have a lot to say. I'm not exactly subtle about my thoughts and feelings and all that shit. I guess I like training and fighting. My quirk is explosions and I like to use it as much as possible. To be honest, outside of training and hanging out with Izuku, I don't have many other hobbies." Smiled, "That's about what I expected. I'm not much more adventurous than you. I prefer to say whatever is on my mind rather than agonize over regrets. My hobbies are swimming and looking after my younger siblings. I like the rain but I don't like winter much. My whole family has frog-like quirks like mine, so we all become lethargic in the cold. Talk to Izuku about that. She's got good control over her fire. She'll keep you warm if you need it." Katsuki responded. Suyu teased, "My, are you acting concerned for me?" With a smirk on his face, Katsuki shot back, hardly froggy. "I just don't want a partner that turns to shit for 3 months. Besides, I'd heat you up myself, but I'd end up blowing you up." He was quickly getting used to Suyu's sense of humor. They talked for a while longer, the exchange getting less awkward and easier. Even though Bakugo had a bit of an ego, Suyu soon realized that he wasn't really that private and was quite honest about himself. The only real issue with him was that he came off as distant. Katsuki, on the other hand, found that although Suyu, whom he almost exclusively called Froggy, was extremely hard to read, she didn't require reading because she was more than willing to share all of her emotions if he asked. Suyu concluded at the end of the hour that she could like Katsuki when he wasn't acting aggressively, and Katsuki thought Tsuyu was better than any other girl he had ever met except Izuku. She didn't ask what had been on the back of her mind all day until the Tsuyu was ready to go. Bakugo, what is your relationship with Izuku exactly? How do you feel about her? The question surprised Katsuki, but he soon recovered and said, she's my best friend and almost like a sister. Tsuyu asked, like a sister? Nothing more. Katsuki tried to retort the comment to Tsuyu, but the frog girl simply grinned. Shit, I don't know. Why are you asking this anyway? You looking for a piece of me? Katsuki screamed. Perhaps I'm more interested in Izuku. You'll never know. But since you're my partner, I'll give you some advice. If you do like Izuku more than as a friend, then you might want to act fast. You have competition. The girl vanished, her croaking laughter resonating through the hallways, before the explosive boy could recover from his outraged yell demanding the names of those pursuing Izuku. As Katsuki made his way to the school gates to go home, that thought made him unhappy. The fact that he happened to run into Todoroki after returning from his own meet and greet with Izuku was just plain bad luck. Hey, you half-and-half bastard. The hell do you think you were doing ordering Izuku around? Asked Katsuki. I didn't make any demands. We had to talk, so I told her where she could find me if she wanted to talk, Todoroki said, raising an eyebrow. Don't give me any of that shit. I swear, if you hurt her, growled Katsuki. An odd, hoarse laugh escaped the ice user's lips. Hurt her? I couldn't if I tried. She'd kick my ass, and yours too, I'd wager. TCH, like I care. Izuku's the only one in the class that could probably beat me in a fight, and she hates fighting. But forget that, I've wanted to say something to you since I heard you'd be Izuku's partner. Quote. Todoroki leaned closer to Katsuki, grasping pulling him until his face was inches from his. I know you're holding back your fire side. Don't ask how I know, it was obvious and I'm not a retard. I don't care why either, so don't give me any of your limp dick excuses. If you make Izuku fail, or worse, get her hurt because you're half-assing it, I swear to God that I will kill you. Fuck you and fuck Endeavor, I will kill you. Do you understand? Todoroki raised an eyebrow as he pulled Katsuki. I understand. I'll be honest, Bakugo, I don't like you. You seem like a common thug, but somehow, you've gotten someone like Izuku to care about you, so you must have some sort of redeeming quality. Still, I'm aiming to become number one, which means I will have to crush both you and her. I won't hesitate to do it either, so be prepared. When I come at you, you will lose. A determined and menacing smirk replaced Katsuki's anger, and he said, bring it on. The two then departed and made their way home. Shoto had found someone who could relate to him more than anyone else. Katsuki and Tsuyu had taken the first step toward becoming a successful team, and Izuku had made a new friend and set out to rid himself of his self-loathing. However, the true test would start tomorrow. The trial of battle. On the first day of actual classes, Shota Aizawa entered homeroom unsure of what to anticipate. He had formed 10 two-man teams out of 20 hormonal teenagers with strong eccentricities and instructed them to spend an hour getting to know one another. That wouldn't have been too concerning on its own, but he purposefully put some people together because they were so dissimilar, which was a surefire way to end things if they weren't old enough to deal with it. He had some hope that they would exercise self-control because they knew that Aizawa would simply expel them if they were too immature. Aizawa-sensei was a little pleasantly surprised when he surveyed his class, who had not yet noticed his arrival. No one appeared overly irritated with their partners, and nobody was hurt. Mineta, Ojiro and Aoyama Tokiyami appeared to be the least successful teams. As Mineta spent more time than necessary describing the backside and breasts of a pretty girl he had seen, Ojiro was sitting at his desk thinking about his pen and likely wondering what would happen if he lobotomized the little pervert with it. Although Aoyama and his partner, Tokiyami, were conversing animatedly, the bird boy's expression was one of long-suffering rather than pain, unlike Ojiro's. Given how much Aoyama was talking, Aizawa-sensei felt that his time with him had lasted longer than an hour, if it ever ended at all. It appeared that the other teams were performing fairly well. Hagakure was joyfully conversing with Koda, pausing occasionally to allow the reserved boy to whisper his succinct answers, all of which caused Hagakure to joyfully flap her arms. Jiro and Kaminari appeared to click right away, talking about music and occasionally making crude jokes about one another. Shiro and Sato, who seemed to fit together quite well, were talking about a TV program they had both seen. Shoji and Ashido were conversing in a low voice, with Ashido doing the majority of the talking and Shoji interjecting occasionally to show that he was paying attention. To his credit, he appeared genuinely interested in what the feisty girl had to say. The final 4 teams, Uraraka Iida, Asui Bakugo, Kirishima Yaoyorozu, and Todoroki Midoriya, formed the largest group. Talking a lot, the 8 teenagers had gathered around the desks of Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. While the boys occasionally added remarks, mostly from Iida or Kirishima, praising the heroic or manly attributes of each hero mentioned, the girls controlled the conversation, which was about their favorite heroes. Todoroki hardly ever added words of his own, and when he did, it was usually at Midoriya's request. Todoroki seemed happier than before, and Midoriya was speaking to him in a natural and smiling manner, which delighted Aizawa. Surprisingly, Bakugo and Asui were also getting along, with one teasing the other and receiving the teasing in return. Bakugo responded to Asui's completely unafraid taunts of the explosive boy with his own well-chosen remarks, all of which were meant to be playful rather than offensive. The surprise was much appreciated. The first day of classes started when Aizawa finally started homeroom. Izuku and her classmates were taken aback by how uninteresting their typical classes were. Given their peculiar looks, it felt strange that Present Mike was teaching them English and Smintos was teaching them modern literature. Although Izuku enjoyed learning, the lessons were rather dull and unremarkable, so it wasn't too bad for her. The majority of the other students, however, were eager to get started, and Katsuki was tapping his foot impatiently. They couldn't wait for All Might to teach the hero studies that afternoon. During Smintosa's class, Leob remarked, "The kids all seem so excited. Is it the teacher or the subject?" In reference to the hero studies, he inquired. As she talked to Leob, Izuku asked Chika to mentally record Smintosa's lesson, both. All Might is renowned as the #1 hero, and we are all eager to begin doing some actual hero training. Really, I take it that we are still discussing your uncle Toshinori. The wolf remarked, he doesn't seem that exciting, but One for All shot him a shady glance. He isn't as powerful as he once was. He only has tiny remnants of One for All left in him after getting hurt and giving me his quirk. He is the strongest person on the planet, despite those drawbacks. Izuku told him, letting Chika use her arm to write notes, he can use One for All at 100% without any trouble in his hero form, but I can't even get to 20% without breaking anything. Although Izuku didn't use it much, bonding with a yokai gave her not only their quirk but also the ability to control certain parts of her body separately from the others. This could help her get out of difficult situations if she was knocked out or died in a way that made it take a long time to get her body back to normal. It also gave her the opportunity to take notes on a subject she wasn't really paying attention to, which was somewhat cheating, but Izuku thought it was okay as long as she reviewed the information herself and didn't use it to cheat on tests. Since Leob had only joined Izuku on the day of the entrance exam and both Izuku and Toshi had been too busy ever since, he was the only yokai member who had not really seen Toshinori or All Might. The wolf became interested in the man as a result. Instead, he wandered to the back of the class to talk to Kori Todoroki, who was reading her son's notes as he wrote, because he didn't want to ruin Izuku's studies anymore. Izuku was raving about the cooking hero. Lunch rush during lunch, much to her classmates' amusement, and then the much-awaited moment finally came. Their very first lesson as heroes. A loud cry of, "I have arrived," echoed throughout the room as the door slammed open, and Class 1A was seated at the desks. Shouting, "I am arriving," through the door like a normal person. All Might, dressed in full costume, rushed through the door. Katsuki smirked and shook his head as Izuku erupted in laughter at the man, who wiggled his eyebrows at her in a playful acknowledgement. "Wow, I can't believe it. All Might's really going to be our teacher," laughed Kaminari. "His costume is so Silver Age, it's kind of giving me goosebumps," said Kirishima. "This is Foundational Hero Studies. In this class, we'll be building up your hero foundation through various trials of heroism. Let's start this year's classes with a student favorite, the battle trial." All Might's every action seemed to culminate in a heroic pose as he made his way to the blackboard and exclaimed his lesson. Since this was the one they were most anticipating, everyone cheered right away. Although the quirk apprehension test was a useful tool for evaluating their overall physical prowess, their combat prowess was what truly distinguished them in the hero's universe, which was becoming more and more focused on combat. For instance, they were all aware that even though Izuku had won the apprehension test, she might not perform well in the battle trial because her goal was to become a rescue hero. Both Todoroki and Asui had the same thought at that point. Perhaps the Bakugo Midoriya team made more sense than they had initially believed. Izuku would handle the rescue missions, while Bakugo would handle the combat hero missions. Even Izuku was thrilled about this because she wanted to see how she stacked up against other heroes in a direct test. Using a button on the wall, All Might exclaimed, "To go with your first battle, we've prepared the gear we had you send in request for. Your hero costumes are ready to go." Multiple shelves of metal briefcases, each labeled with a number between 1 and 20, which corresponded to the students' seat numbers, emerged from the walls. "Our battle gear, awesome!" exclaimed Kirishima, on his feet already. "Nice to see such enthusiasm. Get changed and we'll be ready to go. Meet up at Training Ground Beta. And remember, from here on out, you are all going to be considered heroes," declared the Almighty. The class rushed to retrieve their costumes from the shelves with renewed energy. Toshinori honestly told Izuku's mother that her costume would simply be destroyed every time she used her fire or too much one for all, which discouraged her from making it herself. Inko was not entirely deterred, though, from assisting Izuku with the costume design and giving her daughter a hand-sewn eye mask. The ends were stitched with tiny stars, and it was white. Even though the class had only been in Training Ground Beta for 10 minutes, everyone looked like true heroes in their outfits. Izuku grinned at all the intriguing outfits, such as Shoto's half-ice body, which concealed his fire side in a clear attempt to conceal his father's influence, Ochako's bodysuit with the big leg guards, the adorable visor, and the color scheme. Ida's armor was modeled after Ingenium. The young hero was also pleased to see that Katsuki had heeded her advice regarding his own costume, modifying the prongs of his grenade gauntlets to include extra features, such as a short blade on the right gauntlet and an extendable shield on the left. In order to change the way his explosions were fired from spread shot to something akin to a flamethrower, he had also added sections to the sides of his calves that held alternate barrels for his gauntlets. "Deku, what do you think of my costume? My drawing was a bit bad, so I ended up with a skin-tight bodysuit. It's a little embarrassing." Ochako rushed up to Izuku, grinning broadly. Izuku laughed. "It looks really good. It suits you and gives you a kind of cute astronaut look." After giving the compliment a charming smile, the anti-gravity girl examined Izuku's own costume with care. A white bodysuit that was nearly but not quite skin-tight served as the foundation for the costume. It only formed simple shoulder straps at the top, reaching just above her knees without covering any of her arms. She was wearing elbow-length gloves and knee-high beige boots with internal mechanical braces to support her limbs in the event that she overuses one for all. In the same beige color as her boots, she wore a thigh-length skirt over the bodysuit, but it was more akin to a series of long utility pouches secured with fabric. A basic rebreather, designed to be as smooth and unobtrusive as possible, was placed around her neck. It was intended for gas and smoke, not underwater, as Samahata allowed her breath to escape there. She wore a hood attached to the bodysuit, and the mask her mother had made covered her eyes. The hood had two long, rabbit-like protrusions that were connected to listening devices and had headphones that could be used to cancel out noise if necessary. The rabbit ears were always down instead of sticking up due to the weight of the internal devices. Because the entire outfit was made of shock-absorbing fibers and was fireproof, Izuku could take hits and launch powerful attacks without the costume breaking. Her boots and gloves also had golden stars on the knees and elbows, and a fifth star was emblazoned on her chest. Within each was the stylized face of an animal: a fox for one for all and a wolf for Leob on her elbows, a shark for Samahata, and a sparrow for Taka on her knees, and a cat for Chaka on her chest. Ochako grinned and said, "Yours is really cute too. You must really like stars." "Hee. Yeah, my mom and uncle always said I looked like a shooting star when I ran around smiling as a kid. It kind of stuck," Izuku responded. At the head of the group, All Might gave her a thumbs up while glancing up and down at her, his ever-present smile slightly expanding. Since he was now more aware of the two's relationship, only Izuku and Shoto noticed. The group followed All Might into Training Ground Beta, the mock city, after they had finished ogling each other's costumes. This trial will be an indoor battle. Villain battles are usually seen by the public as an outside event, but most actually happen indoors. In this era of heroes, any villain with a brain will commit his acts lurking in the shadows. So, for this trial, you'll be divided into two-man teams and set against another team. One team will be the heroes and the other will be the villains. Remember, this isn't like the entrance exam where your foes were machines you could destroy without mercy. You're facing real people and potentially your friends. Yaoyorozu questioned, "How will we determine the winners?" Bakugo went on, "Can we blow them up so long as they don't die?" Uraraka appeared somewhat alarmed and asked, "Is there a threat of expulsion like with Aizawa-sensei?" Iida inquired, "How will we be separated?" Aoyama boasted, "Doesn't this cape look killer on me?" With a distressed expression, All Might said, "I can't hear you if you all ask at once." "Sorry," the entire class exclaimed. "All right. This exercise is simple. The villains will enter their assigned building first and place a fake nuclear bomb wherever they chose. The heroes must secure the bomb or capture both villains with the handcuffs I supply you with, while the villains must defend the bomb until the time limit ends or they capture both heroes. Now, originally I was going to have you decide your teams and opponents by lottery, since pro heroes obviously won't always get to choose their allies and foes in the field, but since Aizawa-sensei has assigned you buddies that you've not worked with before, we'll use those as your teams. As for the opponents, we'll pick them by lottery," the mighty said, picking up a box paper. "Your teams are written on these papers, so I'll pull them out 2 at a time. The first team I pull will be the hero team and the second will be the villain team. Let's begin." After giving the box a vigorous shake, the pro hero reached inside and took out a pair of paper slips. "Alright, the first hero team will be Uraraka and Iida. They will be facing the villain team of Aoyama and Tokiyami. The second matchup will be between heroes Hagakure and Kota and villains Jiro and Kaminari. The third matchup will be between heroes Asui and Bakugo and villains Shiro and Sato. The fourth matchup will be between heroes Ashido and Shoji and villains Mineta and Ojiro. And finally, the last matchup of the day will be between heroes Kirishima and Yaoyorozu and villains Todoroki and Midoriya." Izuku blinked. She hadn't anticipated being the antagonist, but technically, this gave her and Shoto the upper hand because they would have 5 minutes to inspect their building and prepare for the hero's attack. However, they opposed Yaoyorozu, who could potentially produce anything that would harm them. To the amusement of Katsuki and All Might, she started muttering to herself. All Might gave each of the heroes and villains in the first match a small map of the building and said, "It's good to see you so enthusiastic, young Midoriya. Now, everyone not in the first match will follow me to the observation point. We'll be able to see everything through several cameras. Remember, we'll cut the exercise early if things go too far. As for the first 2 teams, head off to your building." Izuku wished the present fighters luck before she and the others left for the observation point. Upon their arrival, they discovered a dimly lit room with monitors that displayed every square inch of the structure for the ongoing trial. Aoyama and Tokiyami were inside, while Uraraka and Iida were outside reading their plans. Aoyama appeared to be merely following Tokiyami around and conversing with him as he moved the enormous fake bomb with his dark shadow. In order to drastically darken the space, Tokiyami finally selected a location in a section of the building without windows and then used dark shadow to destroy the majority of the light fixtures. Yaoyorozu remarked, "He's modifying the battlefield to fit his peculiarity. Ingenious." She now stood next to Izuku, with Shoto at her side. Katsuki watched every detail intently on the screens. After All Might declared that the battle had started, Uraraka lifted Iida's weight and carried him to the building's windows, allowing him to gaze into each one. Iida chose to climb into the top floor windows and signal Uraraka to return his gravity before floating herself up after he was unable to locate them through the windows. The battle trial ended surprisingly quickly after the 2 entered the building. Aoyama's laser beam struck, brightly illuminating the surrounding area and making Tokiyami's dark shadow shriek and recoil as the hero team slowly approached the area of the building that was dark, expecting a sneak attack. Then, before Dark Shadow could recover, Iida rushed into the room and slammed into the Raven Boy, knocking him down and cuffing him. Iida took care of Aoyama, who was bent over in agony from his stomach ache, while Uraraka used her quirk to safely remove the bomb. All Might congratulated the 4 fighters and called them back to class. There were no injuries, except for a few bruises on the villain team. All Might turned to the class and said, "Good work, hero team. Now, can anyone tell me who was the MVP of the match?" With assurance, Yaoyorozu declared, "It was Tokiyami." Confused, Sato questioned, "But didn't his team lose?" "They did, but Tokiyami still did the best. He adapted and set up the confrontation in a space that would work for him and his abilities while further changing his surroundings to suit him. His only mistake was not accounting for Aoyama's quirk." Meanwhile, Iida, acting as the hero, attacked too recklessly near the bomb. Uraraka's only mistake was watching Iida fight rather than acting herself, as her distraction could have let Aoyama escape. Aoyama's mistakes are obvious. He didn't take it seriously, used his quirk in a way that harmed himself and his teammate, almost hit his own bomb and then failed to flee or fight when his initial attack failed. Very concise, young Yaoyorozu. You were correct, of course. All Might said, his eyes widening. Looking at the curvaceous girl, Izuku gulped and exclaimed, "Whoa, Momo is amazing. Her analytical skills are comparable to yours." Taka, flying around Momo and closely examining her costume in the hopes of giving Izuku the upper hand, declared, "She'll be a tough fight." With a disgruntled nod, Tokiyami accepted the MVP title, but he was obviously not happy with it. Aoyama was sad that no one else seemed to think he was as amazing as he did. Uraraka moaned and slapped herself on the head for her error, and Iida was yelling at himself. The second match was between heroes Hagakure and Kota and villains Jiro and Kaminari. The building they were sent to was functionally identical to the previous one, though Izuku noticed the floor plan was slightly different, and Jiro and Kaminari entered right away. Jiro was clearly the brains of the team and led Kaminari and their bomb to the top floor, since neither of the heroes had the ability to climb or fly there. They set the bomb up in the corner of the floor furthest from the stairs and then waited, Kaminari watching the door into the room while Jiro jacked into the wall. The hero team were finally allowed in and Jiro directed Kaminari to their location, using her hearing to pinpoint them. Kaminari couldn't find Hagakure, thanks to the invisibility, but he did find Kota and promptly knocked him out with an electric discharge. This also fried Kaminari's brain and allowed Hagakure to capture him, though the spectators could tell that Jiro planned on this. With Jiro's super hearing, it was easy for her to spot Hagakure when she finally approached and knock her out with a sonic attack she created by jacking into her boot and sending the magnified sound of her heartbeat out of the speakers in the souls. While Hagakure only had a bruise and a headache, Kota was sent to Recovery Girl, who told All Might that he would be okay with some rest. Well, the villain team certainly took it that time. Is there anyone besides young Yaoyorozu who can explain the MVP? All Might inquired. Izuku timidly held up her hand, and All Might gave her a radiant smile, saying, "Young Midoriya. How would you respond?" Jiro was unquestionably the MVP. In order to defeat the hero that only she could identify, she organized everything, set up surveillance, gave Kaminari instructions, and used his quirk to destroy the target he could control. Izuku replied, she even placed the bomb so that she would have the most time to defend herself if someone got to her floor. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Momo nod and smile, and All Might was imitating her. Excellent. I should also point out that killing a teammate isn't heroic behavior, but you did a good job as the villain. Well done, Jiro, young. Despite not being accustomed to the praise, Jiro blushed and nodded when the pro hero gave him the accolade. After Recovery Girl promised that he would return soon, All Might announced a brief break so that Kota could return and watch the third match, which was scheduled to pit Tsuyu and Katsuki against Siro and Sato. Izuku used the opportunity to speak with Katsuki, asking, "Are you ready?" She inquired. "Deku, stop being so dumb. I'm always up for a fight, you know. You ought to worry more about your own battle. The ponytail girl and that weird hair guy are not to be taken lightly. She is just as intelligent and resourceful as you are, and he's probably the only guy in the class with whom I could engage in full power combat. They were the ideal matchup to present us with a challenge if you and I were a team, but instead you got half and half," Katsuki remarked, glaring at Todoroki. "Hey, be kind. Actually, Shoto is a pretty nice person," Izuku defended while adorable ly pouting. "You would stand up for anyone who isn't a blatant villain, tch. Katsuki shot back, "The guy's an arrogant asshole that thinks he's better than everyone else." Tsuyu's comment caused Izuku to look strange. The frog girl teased, "Most of the class would say that describes you as well, Bakugo." With a smug grin, Katsuki said, "If it's true, it's not arrogance." Iida was doing his usual overacting as he reprimanded Katsuki, who appeared eager to punch the glasses-wearing boy, while Shoto simply closed his eyes and tried to act as though he was somewhere else. Among the yokai, Leob had to calm down Kori so she wouldn't scream, and Katsuki had insulted her son. Tsuyu and Izuku both giggled, and Ochako joined in when they repeated the exchange to her. While the third hero and villain teams went to their assigned building, All Might took advantage of the fact that Kota had just recovered from Recovery Girl and was looking sheepish from all the attention he was receiving to tell him about the MVP of his match. Each building in the mock city had a basic design with 5 floors and different floor plans, but some had extra features like fire escapes, multiple entrances, floors without windows, or floors that were completely open. The building Katsuki was going to was known for having numerous support beams and reinforced walls to prevent it from collapsing under excessive stress or exploding from its walls. Class 1A watched Sato carry the bomb to a section of the first floor and then use his sugar-enhanced strength to smash chunks off the walls, then use them to block doorways and tape them together on one side to make it look like a normal wall. It wouldn't work in good lighting or if scrutinized, but since the building's light was bad, their chances were improved. With all the ways to the bomb blocked off by fake walls, Sato punched a hole in the ceiling to let the villain team onto the second floor. They plugged the hole and moved to the top floor, just in time for All Might to declare the battle underway. The bomb has been fully concealed, and the heroes are now on the hunt. Standing next to Izuku, Todoroki remarked, "That's a smart move. It is for the time being, but Kachan will start demolishing walls if he becomes irate." Izuku responded, her gaze fixed on the picture of Katsuki wandering the first floor with Tsuyu. "Sato will struggle and Shiro won't have a chance in a straight fight." After Tsuyu climbed the walls outside to check the windows, she returned to Katsuki and said, "I couldn't locate the weapon," before the two cautiously entered with the hero team. The frog girl informed him that it was either hidden or away from the windows. "You do realize that these two oddballs don't have such peculiarities? If so, we ought to apprehend and question one." Katsuki grinned and said, "All right, I'm going to get mad for a while and get their attention. You sneak around and look for the weapon. Or better, just catch both. That'll win us the round." "Should I wait for a chance to sneak up on them?" Tsuyu inquired. "Not at all. Let me handle the fighting. I have been hankering after this." Tsuyu scowled but followed Katsuki, who blasted his way forward, sticking to the ceiling for cover, as he raged toward the stairs to the upper floors, not even bothering to stick to the hallways, just blowing apart the walls. Tsuyu cautiously navigated her way around the building by staying in the shadows and avoiding the flashes from Katsuki's explosions, and eventually she found Shiro alone, as he had snuck back to a lower floor using the holes Katsuki made and was currently in the process of roughly building barriers with the rubble and his tape. Tsuyu was careful to keep Shiro in her sights, so she slipped away and used her radio to contact Katsuki. "I found Shiro, Bakugo. He's on the second floor, using some rubble and his tape to make walls." Her partner's voice came on as her radio crackled. "Shit, I bet these guys used those fake-ass walls to hide the bomb. Are you able to break them?" "Bakugo, I can't break these walls." Tsuyu scowled and edged toward one of Shiro's walls, knocked softly, tugged at some of the looser debris without success, and even secreted some of her weak poison in the hopes of loosening the tape, but to little effect. "I'm on my way, damn it. Second floor, correct. Watch out for the tape guy." Before responding verbally, Tsuyu nodded, temporarily forgetting that Katsuki couldn't see her, and watched Shiro for 5 seconds or so before the boy abruptly spun around and threw tape from both elbows. Tsuyu was able to dodge the first shot, but in her panic, she stumbled on her second dodge and was caught around the ankle by the second extension of tape. "I apologize, Asui." Tsuyu, still reeling from the shock of what had just happened, was about to inquire as to how Shiro had found her when she had an epiphany. Shiro said, drawing her towards him and deftly encasing her body in his tape, capturing her and removing her from the battle. Tsuyu wriggled herself into a seated position against a wall and hoped Bakugo would be able to pull it off by himself. She had been careful to be quiet when speaking to Bakugo, but he hadn't done the same because he wasn't sneaking. He'd spoken loudly, loud enough for Sato to hear and inform Shiro over their own radios. Her wishes were not fulfilled. Because Sato was too big to be very stealthy, Bakugo spun towards him and pointed his palm at him. Almost at the same time that Shiro had taken Asui, Sato had jumped out and attacked Bakugo, attempting a sneak attack. Bakugo's face was twisted into an agonized look of terror, and instead of firing an explosion, he yelled out in fear and staggered back, causing the sugar boy to flinch as he waited, wide-eyed, for the inevitable explosion, but for some reason, it never came. Sato took advantage of the situation to continue the attack and aimed an enhanced punch at Bakugo, ready to knock him out, but just before the blow landed and rendered the explosive boy unconscious, Sato heard Katsuki's whimpering cry calling Izuku's name. Bakugo had been fully prepared to defeat him, but his entire demeanor had changed, and Sato could tell from his eyes that the other boy was not seeing what was actually there and appeared to be trapped in some kind of flashback. Sato scowled down at the now conscious boy. While the girl covered her mouth and was about to cry, the class back at the observation point stared in shock and confusion between the monitors and Izuku. All Might sighed and gestured for Ochako to console Izuku as he took up the microphone, saying, "The villain team of Shiro and Sato have won the third match." Izuku was only able to look at her friend's picture through tears. Kachan had lost. As soon as Recovery Girl showed up carrying a stretcher for Katsuki, Izuku turned to All Might and beseeched her. She was standing outside the building with a remorseful-looking Sato holding Katsuki after accompanying him to the building to retrieve the two teams. After examining each of them, Recovery Girl had Sato load Katsuki onto the stretcher, which was being carried by two small robots. "The lad will be fine. He took a bump to the head but with a little healing and an ice pack, he'll be good as new. He'll be back in 10 minutes or so. Sato, I'd like you to come along too, you've got some abrasions on your knuckles from punching those walls," said the Recovery Girl. "I see. Young Midoriya, go along with Recovery Girl in case she needs assistance. You want to be a rescue hero and medical training is necessary for that. This will be a good learning experience you shouldn't miss," declared the Almighty. Even though everyone could see the act, Izuku was grateful. Recovery Girl was quite fond of Izuku and Katsuki, whom she had worked with since they first came to UA for training as kids, so she had no problem letting Izuku join. Recovery Girl gave Izuku and Sato a brief verbal test during the short walk to Training Ground Beta's medical office. It turned out that every training ground had one of these, asking them to identify injuries and discuss their treatments. Izuku answered the majority of the questions and only skipped the more difficult ones that Recovery Girl threw in to trip her up, while Sato only responded to a small number. After they arrived at the office, Recovery Girl kissed Sato to hasten the healing of the minor knuckle scratches, applied some anti-infection ointment, and wrapped them in gauze before heading to the adjacent room to tend to Bakugo. Pointing to his fists, Izuku questioned, "Sato, are you okay?" Sato answered, "I'm fine. To be honest, I hardly noticed it. How about you?" Izuku glanced at her feet. Everyone had heard and seen what had transpired, and her reaction was undeniable. In addition to using her quirk to get to the building more quickly, she had left the observation before All Might. She gave the big boy an earnest smile and said, "Once I talk to Kachan, I'll be fine. By the way, congrats on your victory. You and Shiro made a great team." "Thanks. Shiro is a pretty good partner to have. But I don't think I'd have won if that hadn't happened. Sorry if it isn't my place to ask, but why did he freak like that? One instant he was about to wipe the floor with me and the next, it was like he was somewhere else. He was terrified and called out for you," Sato said, awkwardly rubbing his head. Izuku gave him a sympathetic look, imagining that it would be frustrating to win just because your opponent had a panic attack. She took a deep breath and briefly summarized their childhood experiences, focusing on the main points. The villain attacked, forced Katsuki to harm her. They managed to flee, and All Might saved them. "It wasn't your fault, Sato. Kachan hasn't used his quirk on a person since that day. I knew that the incident hurt him inside, but I never realized how badly," Sato said, looking at her guiltily after she finished. "Damn, that's rough. Is this meant to be a secret?" asked Sato. "Not really. The girls know because they saw the scar and I told Shoto during my talk with him. Still, I'd rather tell people myself." With a nod, Sato unzipped a pouch from his utility belt. As he took out a small bundle of plastic wrap and opened it to reveal a few cookies, Izuku watched him with interest. Sato grinned and gave Izuku a cookie, saying, "Here, my quirk uses sugar to boost my strength, so I do a lot of baking." Izuku smiled and took a bite, saying, "Thank you." As she joyfully munched on the cookie, Izuku exclaimed, "Wow. These are really tasty. You're a great cook, Sato." Sato took a bite out of his own and grinned a little. "Thanks. So, what are the odds that Bakugo will punch me if I offer one to him?" Izuku laughed. "He won't, I promise. He's not a sore loser unless he thinks his opponent is looking down on him. Besides, he won't try anything violent with me around because he knows I'll scold him." Recovery Girl appeared a short while later, grinning at the two and saying, "Bakugo is awake and ready to head back. I'll stay here in case any more of you kids get yourselves hurt." Izuku was too preoccupied with Kachan to give the old lady much attention, even though she could have sworn she was staring at her when she said that. When the door to the treatment room opened and Katsuki emerged, holding an ice pack to his head in one hand and appearing agitated, she went to open it. As Izuku put her tiny arms around his torso, he complained, "Izuku. Damn it, you didn't have to come. I'm fine, even if Sugar Boy kicked my ass." His face was buried in his chest because she was a good head shorter than him. Izuku's voice was muffled by his chest as she exclaimed, "You called for me. You had some kind of flashback and called my name." As Sato stood motionless, Katsuki's eyes met Sato's and he grimaced, saying, "Shit, I hope that was a bad dream from being clobbered." The ferocious expression in Bakugo's eyes made Sato swallow. With trepidation, he said, Do you want a cookie? I made them myself." Katsuki snarled and swiped a cookie, saying, "TCH, if this is a bribe to stop me kicking your ass because I lost, then don't bother." With a frown, he took a bite and said, "This is actually pretty good." Izuku smiled and pulled away from Katsuki, saying, "I know right. Sato could be a baker hero, like how Lunch Rush is a chef hero." With a guilty expression on her face, she said, "I had to tell him about Jack, it was the only way to explain what happened." Her smile vanished. Izuku repeatedly pinched Katsuki's cheek after he swore aloud, more out of habit than choice. "Well, whatever, so long as he isn't giving me shit for it. The girls and that half-and-half bastard already know, so I might as well tell the rest of the guys in the locker room later." With a sigh of relief, Sato said, "Great, then we should head back. All Might won't start the next fight until we get there." Sato was followed back to the observation point by Katsuki and Izuka, who nodded. Izuka couldn't help but look at Kachan as they walked in silence. She knew him too well to believe that he was acting so casually and ambivalently about his loss. "Excellent, you've returned." Young Iida had just finished giving us a very good explanation for why Sato was MVP of that round. All Might said with a broad smile as they entered the classroom again. "Me," exclaimed the baking boy. While Izuka actually said it, Katsuki gave him a small congrats punch on the arm. Iida replied, "Yes, while you and Siro worked very well together, he informed us that the fake walls were your plan. But I just came up with that because the pastry crust I made this morning broke. I patched it with some caramel as glue and thought Siro's tape could do something similar." Sato gasped. "That's actually some quick thinking. You turned a failure in one situation into a success in another." Izuka grinned. "Not only that, but thanks to your quick thinking of contacting Siro when you heard Bakugo talking, he was able to capture Asui." Iida continued. Katsuki turned to Asui and screamed, "Oh fuck. So I managed to screw us both. Damn it all. Sorry Froggy, I fucked us both." Suyu accepted the apology with a smile and a nod. Considering the cute pout Izuka was aiming at the boy for his profanity, she didn't trust herself to speak without laughing. "We all make mistakes, young Bakugo. If you take anything from today, then remember to always learn from your mistakes, as young Sato did with his baking. Ah, who'd have thought some sweet treats would lead to victory in battle?" declared the Almighty. "My quirk comes from sugar, so all my victories in battle come from sweets," said Sato, scratching the back of his head. All Might gave him a blank stare and said, "Ah, you're right." Before the class started laughing, there was a pause. Even Katsuki and Shoto were grinning, which thrilled Izuka. Kori was bouncing around her son, swooning over his smile. After the laughter subsided, the fourth round began, pitting villains Mineta and Ojiro against heroes Ashido and Shoji. Izuka was eager to see how Shoji's peculiar quirk operated, and she had questions about Mineta's that she dared not ask the small pervert, so she was anticipating his. The villains went inside to set up their bomb after the two teams left for their building. Mineta was less confident in combat, so Ojiro took command and carried the bomb to a room on the upper floor. After setting it up, Mineta threw a number of his sticky balls at it, causing it to adhere to the floor and wall and become practically immobile. After that, Mineta sprinted around the building, hiding as many of the balls as he could, especially on the walls directly under windows and on the floors. Izuka had to concede that, in spite of Mineta's eccentricities, his diminutive stature and the dark hue of his pop-off balls made him an excellent candidate for capture and stealth. Shoji extended his arms so that the webbing between them functioned as a satellite dish and an ear formed on each of the tentacle-like appendages when the hero team was finally allowed to begin. He was able to locate Mineta and Ojiro near the bomb on the top floor with ease thanks to that. Ashido then jumped on Shoji's shoulders and used her acid to make foot and hand holds in the building's exterior walls, making sure to scrape off any extra so Shoji could safely ascend. Ashido entered the building after they arrived at a window close to the bomb, only to find himself trapped in Mineta's ball traps. With two of his other hands glued to more traps on the underside of the windowsill, Shoji covered her mouth as she nearly screamed. The heroes appeared to be finished for a brief moment, but Ashido put some acid on the traps, and they burst like a balloon right away. The villains were alerted by this, but by the time Ojiro and Mineta charged, Shoji was unencumbered and swiftly used his superior strength to disable them, giving the heroes the victory. Excellent work. The heroes win the 4th round. That's 2 wins apiece for the heroes and villains, announced All Might. Since Shoji had incapacitated his opponents with a huge bear hug rather than blows, the participants returned to the class this time unharmed. While Shoji silently thanked those who were congratulating him and moved to the back of the group to stand with Kota and Sato, Ashido grinned broadly at the compliments she had received. When it came time to select the MVP, Katsuki was the one who put up his hand. Tentacle Guy was the MVP. He beat both opponents and stopped his partner from freaking out and costing them the match. Acid Girl's quirk may have freed them, but she'd never have realized to use it if it weren't for him. You have to keep a cool head in situations with villains, he stated. The class was equally astounded by Bakugo's intelligence and perplexed that he couldn't recall their names. He only ever called Izuku by name, referring to everyone else by a nickname that involved their personality or quirk. With a smile on his face, All Might said, "Very concise young Bakugo, though I recommend trying to refer to your classmates by name." He was secretly quite proud that the boy had not used a single profanity during his explanation. The explosive boy shrugged and said, I'm bad with names." The class chuckled, and Katsuki grinned slightly. Izuka also chuckled, but she understood his behavior. He was trying to make himself seem less intimidating to his classmates in order to make it less awkward when he had to reveal the Jack incident to them. He had followed suit when he and Izuka started middle school and word spread among their elementary school peers. The All Might cleared this throat in order to calm down the "all right." Now it is time for the final match and the deciding battle to see if heroes or villains will win the day. Villains Midoriya and Todoroki and heroes Kirishima and Yaoyorozu, head to your building. The 4 teenagers ran dutifully to their designated building, and Izuka and Shoto entered, shutting the door after them. Izuka chose to have her yokai go out and inspect the building instead of referring to the floor plan that had been provided. As he turned his attention from his own plans, Shoto questioned, "You've got the plans memorized already?" Izuka explained, gently pinching her leg, "Yep. I'm good at memorizing and one of my flames can be used as a guide, remember? As long as I can visualize a place, I can always find my way there." She had developed a habit of lying over the years. She felt so bad about it that she would pinch her leg to keep herself focused whenever she had to lie to hide her quirk. Otherwise, it was very easy to spot her lying. Her incapacity to lie, Kachan joked, was evidence that she would never be a villain. Nodded Shoto. "So do you have a plan? If we were the ones assaulting the building, then I could just freeze the place, but since we're defending it, I think it would be a bad idea." "Not that bad of an idea actually. If you freeze the floors and walls, then the heroes will have trouble navigating as they'll slip around. Also, freezing the walls will let us also freeze and hide doorways more easily. Can you move freely on your ice?" Izuka responded. Concerned that his own partner would be as exposed as the heroes, Shoto questioned, "It affects me like everyone else, but I have enough experience with it that I can run at almost full speed without trouble. What about you?" Izuka pointed to the location on Shoto's map and said, "I can fly over it, and if need be, I'll melt the ground where I need to stand. First, we should hide the bomb away from any windows. There's a good spot for that on the 3rd floor." The icy boy nodded, and Izuka, carrying the bomb on her back and using her telepathic connection to the yokai to guide her, led him to the location with ease. Shoto deliberately froze the walls and floor as she went, freezing over the doors and entrances. When they arrived at the room, Izuka set the bomb down and started melting pieces of the walls with her fire, remolding them around the bomb as Shoto quickly called the places she had melted. Prior to the 5-minute preparation period, the bomb was entirely hidden behind fictitious walls that were difficult to spot without close inspection. Izuka wiped her hands of the molten stone residue and said, "Okay, the bomb is secure. Should we attack the heroes or avoid them?" She and her gloves were absurdly fire and heat proof. With a crack of his knuckles, Shoto remarked, "We attack." All Might already announced they could enter. "I'll go for Kirishima, you go for Yaoyorozu. Kirishima's hardening quirk will make it safer for me to freeze him without peeling off his skin by mistake, and Yaoyorozu is probably the one in class whose intelligence and analysis is as good as yours. This will lead you to Kirishima. It'll disappear once it touches him, so if you retreat or let it get too far away, you'll need to find him yourself or get me to make another one," Izuka said, nodding, and summoning a ball of ruby flames filled with Liob's power. Raising an eyebrow at the strange sensation, Shoto took the fireball. Although Endeavor's fire was nearly as intense as Hellfire's, this tiny beacon flame felt more like a warm ball of fur than a fireball. Izuku looked over her shoulder and grinned at Leob, who was wagging his tail joyfully when he saw Shoto enjoying his fire. Shoto exclaimed, "Got it, I'll hunt him down." With Kirishima out of the way, Yaoyorozu loses her shield. Then he let go of the fire beacon and pursued it as it flew down the hall, running into the walls every now and then with a little hiss. "Okay guys, what have you scouted?" Izuka asked her yokai after making sure her comm unit was off and Shoto had cleared her earshot. Taka was the first to arrive. That Yaoyorozu girl isn't fooled by the fake walls at all. She memorized the map so well that she knows which ones are fake in an instant and blasts through them with a cannon she made. She and the Kirishima boy are even skating around on the ice with ice skates she made. She also has strange goggles. Samahata continued, "They look like the night vision ones you see in movies." Izuka sighed. "Heat vision, say, do you guys give off heat that could be seen?" Chika nodded. "Nothing we do can be seen, heard or felt by humans or their tools. We'd be invisible to her heat vision just as much as her normal eyes. Even my flames are invisible unless channeled through you." "Turn your head abruptly," Leob said, "switch to mental communication. Yaoyorozu is approaching fast." Izuka nodded and instantly was able to locate Momo using Leob's quirk. She was now on the same floor, just a few meters away through the icy walls. Todoroki was now fighting, and Kirishima was on a floor below. With her back to the window, the green-haired girl sprinted to a location right in front of it. She then cocked her fist back and aimed a punch at a spot on the frozen wall that faced the window. With a few walls of ice between them, Momo would be running into her line of fire in a few seconds, making it ideal for a one-for-all attack. Taking a cue from Katsuki, Izuku learned how to use one-for-all explosively. By concentrating 50% of its power in the top layer of cells on her fist, she was able to launch extremely powerful strikes without seriously harming herself. It was an effective move, even though it hurt like hell, as if the skin on her hands were being torn off. She could only use it 3 times before it healed or her hands would get nerve damage. She carefully targeted Yaoyorozu with Leob's quirk and waited for the precise moment when she would come into contact with her line of fire. Izuka threw her fist forward just before Momo arrived at the impact spot. "Ares smash," she exclaimed as the amazing air pressure she released ripped through the walls. After blasting through concrete and ice, it finally reached Momo, who was blasted into the wall across the floor from Izuka. Seeing Momo fall to the ground, Izuka looked at her hand and grimaced at the pain. Her entire hand tingled awkwardly, and even though her skin was reddened, it appeared as though she had been slapped on the hand. When Izuka heard a crunch of ice, she sighed and rubbed it against the cool, icy window pane. She turned just in time to see Yaoyorozu swing a wooden bow staff at her head, aiming for her cheek, after noticing a flash of red and black in the reflection on the frozen window. Momo was quick to flip the staff in her hand and deliver an uppercut swing to the underside of Izuka's chin after she channeled some of one-for-all to her cheek to lessen the blow. Everything happened in a flash after that. The sight of a third strike, this time from Momo's palm, would have caused a normal person to stumble. Normal people had instincts to keep them alive. The staff waiting for the stumble would have knocked a normal person down and swept their legs out from under them, leaving them crumpled and stunned on the ground long enough for the handcuffs dangling from Momo's belt to grab hold of them. Izuka had not been a typical person since she was 9 years old. To keep her from faltering in perilous circumstances, she and her yokai had conditioned her survival instincts. To the horror of Momo and those observing through the window's thin ice and glass, Izuka did not stumble but instead remained steadfast and took the palm strike hard to the chest, knocking her backward. Izuka gasped as she fell due to the cold shock of the ice and the sharp, biting edge of the glass. She was unable to use her flying ability and instead used some weak fire that she had conjured to try to push herself back in. When Izuka saw Momo's horrified and frightened face, she felt a terrible twinge of guilt and made eye contact with her as she fell from the 3rd floor to the ground below. Izuka would have splattered against the floor in a shower of blood if her flames hadn't counteracted some of her momentum, but instead she was able to roll and land on her neck, breaking it and instantly killing herself. Momo ran frantically for the stairs, and there was a loud crack and a scream. Katsuki led the charge as All Might and Class 1A fled the observation point, while Iida ran for Recovery Girl. When Momo screamed, Shoto turned on the 2nd floor of the building, and Kirishima behind him froze to his neck. Kirishima spluttered, "What the hell?" as his partner sprinted past them both without giving him or Todoroki a glance. Shoto released Kirishima with a brief burst of heat after experiencing a sudden cold dread, and then he ran after Yaoyorozu. Wondering what the devil was going on, Kirishima ran after them both. The rest of the class had arrived with Iida carrying Recovery Girl on his back by the time the current fighters had exited the building and turned the corner to where Izuku had fallen. All Might, Katsuki, and Recovery Girl stood looking utterly shocked when they saw Izuku groan and get to her feet, appearing unharmed and cracking her neck back and forth with a slight apprehension. "Phew, good thing my flames cushioned my fall. It saved my life. Didn't stop me dislocating my shoulder though," Izuku said, rubbing her shoulder as she became aware of the people around her. Too stunned to be relieved, Kaminari exclaimed, "Holy crap, Midoriya. We thought you died." "What the hell happened?" inquired Kirishima. "Midoriya got knocked out of a third-floor window," Mineta exclaimed, avoiding a sneer as she looked at Izuku. Momo covered her mouth and cried, "Oh my god. Izuku, I'm so sorry. I thought you'd stumble and so I could trip you. My god, I could have killed you." Momo trembled and felt like throwing up. She had always aspired to be a great hero, to use her quirk for the benefit of others, to return to society what she had been given as a child of a wealthy family. Additionally, she nearly killed one of her friends during her first practical exercise, all while posing as one of the heroes. Izuku noticed the expressions that crossed the taller girls, immediately ran to embrace her. "I'm sorry, Momo. I didn't mean to scare you. I only took the hit because I knew I'd be able to survive. I'm sort of the cowardly type. I don't have a lot of confidence, so I had to train away a part of my survival instinct so I wouldn't cower or flee in battle. You're so strong, so I wanted to beat you, but I didn't stop to consider the consequences for you." When Momo turned to face Izuku, the younger girl was about to cry, but Momo was sobbing uncontrollably. "I almost kill you, and you apologize to me. You're too kind, Izuku," Momo said, laughing despite her tears. The rest of the class sighed with relief as Izuku laughed as well. Recovery Girl inspected Izuku and then planted a restorative kiss on her. The crick in her neck was healed, and it gave off the required healing glow to fool the class, but it obviously didn't actually heal her shoulder because it had never hurt. After finishing, Recovery Girl used her walking stick to gently strike Izuku's head, telling her to use caution the next time. Izuku looked guiltily at All Might and Katsuki and nodded. Kachan simply sighed and shook his head, but he had no intention of reprimanding Izuku for his own earlier error. All Might simply had a relieved expression. "Okay students, I think that's enough for today. We'll call the final match a draw, but all four of you did well. Midoriya came up with a good plan and Todoroki's ice was instrumental. Yaoyorozu was able to counter Midoriya and Todoroki very effectively, and Kirishima took point and acted as a perfect shield for Yaoyorozu and allowed her to slip away while he kept Todoroki busy. I'd say there is no need for an MVP this time," the All Might declared, raising his hands. "Now, classes are over for the day. Head to the locker rooms and change, then you can head on home for the day. Young Midoriya and young Bakugo, I'd like the two of you to stay for a moment." Katsuki yelled to the guys, "Hey, don't any of you guys leave, till I get back. I've got important shit to tell you all," as both teenagers nodded. The other boys just nodded and left, but Mineta shuddered. Mina and Ochako in particular pledged to wait for Izuku as well. After they were gone, All Might turned to face the two and, with a great puff of steam, reverted to his normal form. Toshinori sighed and remarked, "Phew. Keeping that form while not fighting is tough. Now, you two have had pretty tough days, right?" Both teenagers nodded, but their eyes were burning with resolve despite how exhausted their faces were. Toshi was pleased to see it. "What did you think of your classmates?" "Shoto, Momo and Kirishima are all really strong. Everyone in our class is strong. Even Aoyama and Mineta if they got over their personality flaws," Izuku stated. "It pisses me off, but I don't know if I can beat them all. Some of them, sure, but the top guys, I don't think I'd win." Katsuki sighed. Toshi smirked slightly and said, "And Izuku started, we're going to get stronger. And become the world's greatest heroes," Katsuki concluded, popping his fist. Toshinori grinned, not his arrogant All Might smile, but a sincere smile of affection. The two tiny eggs he had tended had finally hatched and were growing. With their amazing eccentricities, it was very easy for these two to feel like they were the greatest of the best, but they recognized that they still had a lot of growing to do and resisted the urge to become completely arrogant and overconfident. It made Toshinori happy. Good. You both make me proud. Now run along now, your classmates will get worried. After exchanging a smile, the two teenagers decided to meet at the school gate and walk home together. Izuku was asked what All Might wanted when he ran to the girls' locker room, but he simply waved it off and said he wanted to see how the two students who had been hurt the most were doing. Momo sighed and said, "Thank goodness you're okay, Izuku. I'd never forgive myself if I'd killed you." Izuku hastily took off her costume and changed back into her uniform before saying, "Don't worry about me, Momo. I'll try and be more careful in future." Momo was the only girl who hadn't finished changing, and she was the second to last. Given that Momo had done nothing but let her hair down, it was also a little strange. Izuku said, "Hey Momo, you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine, just, taking a moment to wind down. My body got really tense from watching the fighting and then fighting myself." Momo replied with disdain. Her lie was so obvious that everyone but Izuku looked at her with suspicion, but Izuku, who was always naive and trustworthy, just showed concern. Izuku grinned as she ran behind Momo and placed her hands on the taller girl's shoulders to massage them. "Oh, here, let me help. I used to do this for my mom and Katsuki when they got stressed out." Izuku froze as Momo let out a painful yelp. Upon closer inspection, the younger girl noticed a bruise purpling just under Momo's clothing. When Izuku blew Momo into a wall, she nearly slapped herself. She would undoubtedly get bruises. "You're hurt," cried Izuku. In an attempt to calm Izuku, Momo said, "It's fine, really. Nothing like a dislocated shoulder." However, the worry in the girl's glistening green eyes was too much to ignore. Taking Momo's hand in one hand and her own bag in the other, Izuku yelled, "Nonsense. I'm taking you to recovery, girl," before pulling Momo from the room. As the other girl's laughter followed her out of the room, Momo flushed deeply. "Really Izuku, I'm okay." Izuku nearly bumped into Momo as she spun around. The smaller girl said, "I want to be a rescue hero. Someone who helps people and looks after the injured. I'll never overlook someone's wounds, especially my friend." Before turning on her heel and dragging Momo to recovery girl. Their faces were too close for Momo to feel comfortable, but the resolve in Izuku's eyes prevented her from renouncing. Momo was too stunned to argue, and her only real thought before arriving at the nurse's office was that Izuku's hand was very soft and warm, and even though it was small, it seemed to fit Momo's hand perfectly. After that, Momo was too flushed to think much more. Izuku waited with Momo while she was healed and reprimanded by recovery girl, then stayed with her while she changed and walked her to her family's waiting limo. It took Izuku 20 minutes to finally meet Katsuki at the school gate. Fortunately, Kachan didn't appear to have had to wait long. Izuku said, "Hey Kachan. How did it go with the guys?" Katsuki gave a lopsided grin, "Surprisingly good. Most of the guys just nodded and said they understood why I freaked out. The robot guy did that weird hand motion and praised me for not wanting to turn my quirk on others, or some shit, and half got a freaky look on his face and touched his scar. Also, Sugar Boy said he was going to bake us both some cookies, so I told him you like oatmeal raisin. Freaking lightning punk thought I was making a joke." Izuku sulked and said, "But I do like oatmeal raisin." Katsuki simply noogied Izuku and laughed, saying, "I know Deku." It's still weird. When the two heard someone yelling Katsuki's last name, Izuku pouted even more and smoothed out her ruffled hair. "Hey Bakugo, wait up." When the two turned around, Kirishima was sprinting in their direction. "Hey, about what you said in the locker room, I figure I could help you out." With a raised eyebrow, Katsuki said, "Oh yeah, how's that? My quirk hardens my body, so I thought you could get used to using explosions on me without hurting me. You're gonna have trouble fighting if you can't use your quirk on people, right? So use it on me. I won't get hurt and you can get used to it. Plus, it lets me test my hardness on someone that can actually do some damage. It's win-win." Kirishima smiled and lifted his arm, which had a stony texture due to his quirk. "You seriously want me to blow you up?" Katsuki asked, staring at him. "Heck yeah, it'll be great. You and I can be training buddies. Midoriya, you could join in too. Since you're immune to fire, you could help Bakugo get over his fear even faster than me, and you can test your strength by punching me. It'd be win-win-win. Here, pass me your phones," Kirishima said to them, removing the phones from their grasp after quickly adding his number to both. He gave them back to Izuku while giving Izuku his own. Katsuki added her number more grudgingly, but Izuku grinned and did so joyfully. Kirishima said, "Great, when should we train together? And where? How about in Gym Delta after school? That gym is reserved for Class 1A private training after school. We could bring our partners too." Izuku made the suggestion. Katsuki said dismissively, "Sure, Froggy would probably like it. Just don't expect me to be all buddy-buddy with half and half." Kirishima grinned brilliantly and said, "Awesome. I'll text Yaoyorozu. You do the same for your partners. See you guys tomorrow." Before rushing home. "He's so nice. I never thought a manly man would act like that. Everyone in our class is amazing." Izuku grinned as she watched him run. Izuku was only a step behind Katsuki as he rolled his eyes and started to walk home, chatting merrily about all of their new classmates. You wouldn't believe that she had actually passed away just an hour or so prior. Nevertheless, the pair returned home in a positive frame of mind, prepared to take on the hero course's challenges. Elsewhere, a rough-looking young man sitting in a seedy bar remarked, "So, he's teaching now." As the man went on, "Hey, what do you think would happen if the symbol of peace was killed by villains?" The bartender, who was composed of black smoke, said nothing. As dozens of invisible spirits gathered around him, twisted and corrupted by his sinister aura, the man grinned ruthlessly beneath the hand covering his face. Let's find out. Game on.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.